post office outside of Washington. The post office in Merrifield is the only one handling the mail for the lottery. The State Department is issuing the cards on a first-come, first-served basis, and this has raised many hopes.
As an immigrant and without having papers, I'm not allowed to go and travel to my country. I haven't seen my parents for 5 years. That's one thing, but I'd love to go back and be able to come back to these states since I want to stay in the States for the rest of my life.
To look around here and see all the people that are around, just have to hope for the best.
What do you make of this whole scene here?
Like a mob.
Oh, it's not like a mob.
Well, not like a mob, but so many people here. People won't have enough out of visas in, I think, to do any good.
The visas will give permanent residence status to people from 35 nations, but 40% go to the Irish. The State Department will only consider applications that arrive after midnight Monday and before midnight October the 20th. While the inscription on the Statue of Liberty beckons huddled masses yearning to breathe free, a new U.S. policy appeals to those with money to invest. And as Jamie McIntyre reports, the U.S. is not the only nation seeking immigrants with cash in hand.
In a government-produced videotape, Australia unabashedly woos wealthy foreigners with promises of economic opportunity.
In the Victorian city of Melbourne, Balbir Joel is leaving for work. He came to Australia from Malaysia just 5 years ago as a business migrant.
Australia's business migration program pumped more than $1 billion into its economy last year.
We've always seen it as a two-way affair. We offer something to people coming to Australia. We have some unique assets for immigrants, and immigrants can offer a lot to Australia.
Canada has a similar plan that's brought it $3 billion a year since 1986. Now the U.S. is getting in on the quid pro quo. Under its plan, 10,000 immigrants could bypass the usual restrictions if they have at least $1 million to invest in a business that will create at least 10 new jobs. The INS calls the program investor visas. Critics call it a cynical swap of green cards for greenbacks.
And we're really sort of selling our souls, in my opinion. Other countries are doing it, but I don't care how many countries do it. It is not what the United States has been all about.
But the INS argues Congress did not abandon the ideals inscribed on the Statue of Liberty. By increasing the number of permanent resident visas by 200,000, it ensures millionaires and their families won't take the place of the huddled masses.
They've taken care of the tired and the poor, but they've also ventured off into some areas that would bring something to the national interest, and this is one of those.
One potential source of millionaire immigrants is Hong Kong, where the wealthy worry about the coming communist rule in 1997. And private companies specializing in business migration report considerable interest from elsewhere along the Pacific Rim.
Many of these people, while extremely wealthy, are interested in coming to the United States for the protection of their families. There are troubled times abroad.
So far, the Immigration Service says it's received only 100 applications for the new investor visas, but they say once word gets out, they hope to receive as many as 4,000 applications, translating into 40,000 new jobs and pumping $4 billion into the U.S. economy. Jamie McIntyre for CNN, Washington.
That is a quick update of the news. I'm Molly McCoy in Atlanta. Now to Frank Sesno in Washington.
Thanks, Molly. We're awaiting the resumption of these hearings in the caucus room, but we're also awaiting to hear from our correspondent, Bob Franken, on Capitol Hill, who's got a guest with him. Bob, they're reconvening in there. Senator Biden, we can see, is talking now. Let's just throw it to you and see what you can get.
Right now, Frank, we're talking with Senator Arlen Simpson, who, although he has been, I'm sure you'll agree with this description, uncharacteristically quiet during most of these hearings, is still leading as the assistant minority leader the effort to get Judge Thomas confirmed. Now, what is your purpose here today when we have her friends saying that she had come to them and complained about sexual harassment in the past?
Our purpose here today, and it's going to be all day, is to gather as much as we can from both sides based upon the witnesses that they want us to hear from. This is I would gather, the most impressive panel, or one of them today, favoring her situation. These are supposedly friends who corroborate her testimony.
Do you feel that in any way that they have?
Well, I was surprised when Mr. Paul said that he really didn't know her that well at all, and that when she talked to him about issues of sexual harassment by her supervisor, she never mentioned Clarence Thomas, and he was never told and didn't know it was Clarence Thomas until he made the tie just several weeks ago. Now, I think that's very weak evidence, and I like Mr. Paul. I think he's a very able professor. Well, let me ask you this, sir. You went to some lengths to describe your concern with the problem of her, I think to use your term, following him. She followed him. That term. Well, in any case, that was the gist of what you said, that she had followed him from the Education Department to EEOC and had maintained contact with him over the years. And you find that very difficult to swallow. Well, yeah, because we're talking about behavior. This witness, Miss Hill, is saying that Clarence Thomas did not commit sexual harassment against her. I know that's hard for people to believe. She is just simply saying, I want the committee to look at his behavior. Well, if that's the case, and then it got all blown out of proportion, got into the media, got splattered around, if that's the case, then I was asking these four friends of hers, how then do you describe her behavior when this disgusting spew of obscenities was ladled on her in a courtship ritual of some kind, which is beyond my comprehension. If that's what courtship is devolved in, I've missed some of the nuances of it. Or whatever it was done for, it's disgusting and venal. And what she said then is that she went with him to the EEOC, and then when she was out of his grip, out of his power, out of his dominance, out of his whatever sinister role he met in her life, then she then voluntarily met with him, had dinner with him,
maintained contact with him.
But
the answer to that question, sir, was that, well, you can't burn bridges. For professional reasons, you must maintain contact with people who you work with and who could hurt you. Isn't that plausible to you?
I don't know if you and I, as men, will ever be able to answer that. All I know is that I've been talking with women who I don't know, who have been victims of sexual harassment, and they said, let me tell you something. It's fight or flight. You either say, you have offended me, I'm embarrassed, I won't stand for that kind of conduct anymore, or you get away from them, and then you go through the procedures.
But sir, what about the reality of feeding your family and yourself? Isn't the fact that some people need to keep their employment and maintain a career mitigating here?
We're not talking about some people. We're talking about Anita Hill. Sure, those are things that are very valid. But Anita Hill had a Schedule A lawyer's job and was under no threat of losing that job, and we have affidavits to that effect. Now, let's keep it to this issue.
Well, except, sir, that you went on to say that after she had left, you were wondering how it is she could maintain contact with him over the years.
That's what I am.
The explanation is that you learn, so the explanation is, not to burn your bridges.
Well, I would tell you, I would burn my bridge. I'm not a woman, but if that were the case, of what the vividness of what she described, if that isn't the most repugnant, disgusting, obscene conduct, and to keep up a relationship with someone who has salaciously suggested all that is a great puzzle to this U.S. Senator.
Well, as a matter of fact, one of the explanations that was given is that, particularly as a black woman, you heard this answer, that Anita Hill would have to take more than anybody else might have to take.
Well, she was in Washington, D.C. If she were in another state in the Union or somewhere else, I would believe this. But when you are in the nation's capital in 1981 or 82 or 83 and somehow believe that you can't get a proper hearing on the issue of sexual harassment in the workplace is beyond my comprehension. There couldn't be a better fertile ground for it.
As the hearing wound on, Senator Joseph Biden, the chairman, said this isn't so difficult for men to understand. How many men, and I'll be paraphrasing, but he asked this, how many men have been harassed some way in the workplace and have, for expedient reasons, decided they needed to take it and stay on?
I don't know that. And that's not the subject of the issue. The subject of this issue before this group is Anita Hill. She would not have lost her job because Harry Singleton would have given her a job. She was a Schedule A appointment, not a political appointment, and she would not have lost her job, and there was plenty of budget to take care of the job, so that is not material.
I have to interrupt. We have to return now. Thank you very much, Senator Arlen Simpson, Republican of Wyoming. Back to Frank.
Thanks, Bob. And as we go back to the hearing room to take a look at what things are happening there, and as we wait for the hearings to resume, we will continue our conversation with our analyst, William Schneider. Well, We were listening to Senator Simpson there together, and a couple of points you sort of said, well, that may be right there, the problem. What were you referring to?
I was referring to the problem of comprehension, of understanding. There are many on the panel we just heard who said that the members of the panel don't understand what it is like for a woman in Anita Hill's position, the powerlessness, the vulnerability she feels. And Senator Simpson acknowledged that maybe it's a lack of comprehension. He said, I don't understand rationally how a person could have decided to stay on in that position, to maintain a cordial relationship. Apparently from the poll results, a lot of people don't understand it. And Anita Hill's supporters are essentially saying, you wouldn't understand this.
Well, under questioning by Bob Franken there, Senator Simpson was essentially saying, look, if you're harassed like this, you leave the job. It's very simple. What we heard from the women testifying here was that it's never that simple.
Well, it doesn't appear to be that simple. Anita Hill said my response was not atypical, and the two women on the panel both said that they would have had difficulty doing things differently from Anita Hill, even if they knew what the details of the alleged harassment were.
Although Ellen Wells did say when some of the details were provided under questioning, when she was told what some of the specifics of the language that Anita Hill is alleging, if that had happened to her, she seemed to indicate that she would have had a stronger response than Anita Hill may have had.
She might have. She's a different person than Anita Hill. It's hard to tell. But we do know that a lot of women do what Ellen Wells said. They put up with this. They grit their teeth. They take it because that's been the pattern, the prevailing pattern in the past.
One person's word against another, and another example of issue upon issue. The specific case versus the overall principle and issue of sexual harassment. Our coverage will continue just after this.
Performance, endurance, elegance. What more can anyone ask of a luxury car?
Quite a bit, actually.
Want to trade? What you got? Give me an orange juice, I'll give you my sandwich. I got a sandwich. Give me an orange juice for my donut. Half deodorant. Deal.
There's nothing like 100% pure Florida quality orange juice with the vitamins, minerals, and taste that make you feel so good.
Hey, you drank more than half. I had to. My half was at the bottom.
100% pure Florida quality orange juice. It makes you feel so good.
Over the past 5 years, more people switched to Glidden than any other paint. Now, if that isn't the ultimate test of quality, we don't know what is. Glidden, a better way to paint.
And right now, quality Glidden paints are yours at terrific savings during our NFL Super Sale. So hurry down to your nearest Glidden dealer and pick up America's favorite paint at NFL Super Savings.
Glidden, a better way to paint.
America's most popular brand of appliance is on sale right now at Sears Brand Central. So hurry and save $30 on this matching heavy-duty Kenmore washer-dryer pair, now at their lowest prices ever.
It took all day, but they finally came up with one very big idea. What do you bet they printed on a laser jet from Hewlett-Packard?
Well, we've always said that men and women don't understand each other. Could that be the problem in sexual harassment? Best-selling author Deborah Tannen will tell us Monday on Sonia Live, 1 p.m. Eastern, only on CNN.
And again, the Senate caucus room where these hearings have been taking place, and we do expect the hearings to resume momentarily, but again, there is other news that is taking place in our world today, and we're going to go down and check in with Jonathan Mann to hear about some of it. Jonathan?
Thanks, Frank. Taking a look at some of the other news, the love match of Chris Evert and Andy Mill has produced a son. The retired tennis star delivered a baby boy yesterday in the same Florida hospital where she herself was born. The 8-pound, 6-ounce baby has been named Alexander James Mill. Mother and son are both reported in good condition today. Mill, the former Olympic skier, and Everett were married in 1988. Former President Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy are to attend a private dinner with Morocco's king today. The couple arrived in the capital for a 4-day visit late yesterday. After their meeting with the king, the Reagans plan to visit Fez, the site of important African architecture, and Marrakesh, the gateway to the Sahara Desert. The Reagans are scheduled to leave Morocco Wednesday for London. Former President Jimmy Carter will be absent from the festivities surrounding the dedication of Ronald Reagan's presidential library next month. Instead, Carter will be in Africa, monitoring the October 31st Zambian elections. Then Carter is expected to spend the next week traveling in Africa. Reagan's library is scheduled to open November 4th near Simi Valley, California. President Bush and former Presidents Ford and Nixon are scheduled to join Reagan for the ceremonies. California's governor has snuffed out cigarette and smokeless tobacco giveaways in public places. Yesterday, Pete Wilson signed a bill that outlaws free tobacco handouts as well as coupons or rebate offers. The bill includes fines ranging up to $1,000 for violators. Wilson says the measure will protect the health of children by eliminating easy access to tobacco products. Before this bill, tobacco companies distributed an estimated 97 million free cigarettes in California annually. As fall colors the leaves on trees across much of the U.S., tourists are flocking to the forests. One such pastoral park lies on the Tennessee-North Carolina border in the Smoky Mountains, where many visitors pay a drive-through visit. As CNN's Earl Casey reports, I'm told actually that we're going to go back to Washington at this moment. Here's Frank Sesno.
Thanks, John. Sorry for the abrupt change of plans, but abruptly the senators are coming back into the Senate caucus room. There you see Senators Howell, Heflin, and Edward Kennedy chatting for a bit with the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Joseph Biden. What is supposed to be happening here in a few moments is a resumption of the questioning of Anita Hill's four friends. Anita Hill's, who have showed up today to say and to testify under oath that they recall conversations earlier in the 80s, 81 through 83 roughly, in one case as late as 1987, where she made reference to sexual harassment on the job. The clear attempt here is to establish that this is not a story that Anita Hill has made up, as some allege, in particular on the Republican side. The Republicans will have a continued opportunity to question these four in the person of Senator Arlen Specter, who's taken the lead in most of the very tough questioning that we've heard over the past several days. Specter, a former Philadelphia prosecutor, showing his stuff on more than one occasion. Our White House correspondent Mary Tillotson is standing by at the White House. Mary, this continues to be a subject of some concern over there. Any further assessment of how this is going this day?
Not great shape is the way one administration official put it to me this afternoon, but pro-Thomas forces think they're in decent shape, his word, going into the hearings this afternoon. This administration official conceded that it was not good news for Clarence Thomas's defenders that these witnesses are before the Senate this afternoon, saying Anita Hill told them, some of them as long as 10 years ago, that Clarence Thomas was making sexual advances to her when he was her boss at EEOC. But it is the administration theory that Anita Hill was lying then and is still lying, that she has unwittingly drawn the witness panel today into her delusion, is the word this administration official used, and that if there was any damage done to Clarence Thomas by these witnesses who seem to corroborate Anita Hill, that their panel of pro-Thomas supporters will recoup any damage this afternoon when they come in and attempt to establish a motive for Anita Hill's lying. The administration, of course, insists that it is she who is lying about this, not their nominee for the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas. The motive they will try and establish, or at least lay a plausible groundwork for, is that she was embittered toward Thomas, perhaps because she was passed over for promotion, that she was politically to the left of Thomas, and so has some political axe to grind with him. Those are the points that we can expect the pro-Thomas panel to make later this afternoon. Frank?
Mary, this question of motivation, this question of an axe to grind, this is something that we've heard these senators try to bring out before in their questioning of Anita Thomas. Are any White House officials suggesting what is going to be so conclusive in the testimony we're going to hear later in the day, where we haven't heard it produced till now?
No, and I have not had anyone suggest to me that there is going to be a conclusive and definitive picture of her as a person or her as a liar that they're going to draw. All they want to do is insinuate that this is a possibility, that this is a plausible explanation for her behavior, which they insist is lying, rather than their nominee being the one who is lying. I think it was Senator Howell Heflin who brought up yesterday that one of the questions lawyers always look at in their trying to weigh this is...
Mary, I'm going to have to cut you off here because the gavel
yes.
comes down, the hearings are resuming. Let's listen in.
To explain to the witnesses what we're doing is trying to figure out the remainder of the schedule. I emphasize again that Senator Thurmond and I are under strict time constraints based on placed on us, understandably, by the entirety of the Senate, the leadership in the Senate, and the remainder of the Senate, to resolve this entire matter in time for all of our colleagues to be able to consider all the testimony here and make a judgment. As I've indicated at the outset, were this a trial, which it is not, all of you who are sitting panel members here know that there would be a legitimate reason for this trial to go on for another week or more. We do not have that luxury. The nominee insists on a resolution of it. The White House insists on a resolution of it, and the Senate insists on a resolution of it. So what we're attempting to do is work out a not only a time when we're going to vote on this on the Senate floor, which is done 6 o'clock Tuesday night, but an agreement on an absolute end time when these hearings will end. And I assure this panel you will not have to be here till the end. We are about to do that with you all now, and we will probably recess very briefly after this panel is completed to discuss the final witness list and the time frame within which each witness or panel will be coming before the committee. I thank the panel, and I thank everyone in this room for their indulgence, and I hope they understand, but based upon the knowledge of the arcane, the processes of the Senate, I'm sure no one will understand. But nonetheless, that's where we are. Now, where were we in questioning? Who is next, Simon? Senator Simon has 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, first, if I may comment on something said by Senator Specter just before my time came up. He said, I wrote down, there were more than 11 calls, only 11 that were documented. To my knowledge, that is an inaccurate statement. We know...
Mr. Chairman, I said we would produce a witness who would testify to that there were other calls, that 11 were documented when he wasn't there, but we would produce a witness. So if Senator Simon's going to quote me, please be accurate.
Well, if you know that there were more, so far there's been nothing entered into the evidence suggesting that there are more than 11 calls.
Let me ask the senator from Pennsylvania, has the name of that witness been made available to the committee?
Yes, that's Ms. Holt, who's the custodian of the records.
Ms. Holt, all right,
and
fine.
Also the secretary who was prepared to testify that there were many more calls made by Professor Hill, which...
Our coverage of these extraordinary hearings will continue in a moment after this break for local cable companies. Stay with us.
That's right.
Thank you.
Do you realize just how much difference there is in life insurance rates from one insurance company to the next? For instance, if you're in good health and don't smoke cigarettes, Garden State Life Insurance may be able to save you as much as 50% off the cost of your life insurance. That's right, 30, 40, 50% off what you'd have to pay for a comparable amount of coverage elsewhere. And not just this month, but year after year for the rest of your life. Savings like that are well worth looking into. So if you need $100,000 to $1 million or more of quality term life insurance, you owe it to yourself to get the facts fast by calling now, 800-257-1257, toll-free for this free information package, including a personal coverage proposal that shows you just how much your savings might be. There's no obligation, no sales pressure, and it could be a real eye-opener. For instance, as your Garden State Life representative can tell you,
if you're a healthy 40-year-old who doesn't smoke cigarettes, you may qualify for $100,000 worth of quality term life insurance at rates so low they're less than 55 cents a day.
how do we do it? First, you save because we offer this life insurance at these low rates only to people who are in good health. That cuts our risk and your premiums. Then, because this quality term life insurance is sold in amounts of at least $100,000 or more, you get the advantage of volume discounts. And it's easy to do business with Garden State Life Insurance because you deal with us directly. You're always just a phone call away. So call today, 800-257-1257, toll free, 257-1257 for your free personal coverage proposal. No obligation, no pressure. Discover how this quality term life insurance could save you as much as 50% off your premiums every year for the rest of your life. 800-257-1257, toll free. Call Garden State Life Insurance for your free information today, 257-1257.
This is CNN.
We return now to our extensive coverage of the Thomas confirmation hearings. Joining now in progress, Senator Paul Simon's questioning of witnesses supporting Anita Hill. Let's listen in.
And furthermore, to put it down on paper to say he said X to me on Thursday would have been no more evidence for us today than anything else.
And of course, she didn't anticipate anything.
No, so
like
there was
this.
no reason. As the judge said, she wasn't thinking of bringing a suit.
And if I could relate it, it says to me that she didn't intend to prosecute or carry on in that way. You've mentioned your own experience. Did you document that in any way, writing it down in a diary or anything?
No, I did not. It's just something that will always be with me, and so I have no need to write it down. I would like to forget it, and I cannot. So I would not want it to be anywhere where it could be picked up and read by anyone.
Mr. Carr?
I would echo that, I guess, but in addition, my recollection of discussing these things with Anita Hill is that they were very painful for her. And I think she did not want to certainly talk about them with me, and she may well have wanted to forget them, and that writing them down may, in fact, in and of itself, have been additionally painful for her.
Mr. Paul?
Senator, I would have to say, as a lawyer, that the absence of documentation is completely consistent with my recollection of her reluctance in wanting to discuss it, and her statement that she felt she had no recourse.
If I may ask one more question, Mr. Chairman. Briefly. Please. Each of you has explained why you are here. Why do you think Anita Hill came forward and testified? Judge?
She has said that she came forward out of the sense of her obligation as a citizen. I think the incidents that occurred those many years ago have raised a serious question of character in someone who has been nominated for one of the most important positions in the country. I know that she was very reluctant to come forward, but I think she felt she had a duty to her country.
Ms. Wells?
Well, I can only echo what the judge has said. Anita, Professor Hill, is a very loyal person, and therefore she's loyal to what she believes she ought to do. And so therefore she has come forward only because she felt that that was the right thing to do.
Mr. Carr?
Senator, I can really only, I guess, speculate on why she has come forward. I would think my recollections of her personality are that while she would like to come forward in this manner, she would be terrified of the invasion of privacy, and she would have been extremely hesitant But at the same time, I have the recollection that she is a forthright person, and when asked a question, she feels compelled to give a honest answer. And I would think here that she has somehow found herself on this sort of proverbial slippery slope, that she has felt obligated to make some statement when asked, and that has snowballed totally out of her control to the point where she had no alternative but to come forward in a total and fulsome way.
And if I could ask you, and then I want to hear from Mr. Paul, she is both a lawyer and a law professor. I assume she has a very elevated feeling, as we all do, for the Supreme Court. You think this was a factor in coming forward also?
It may well have been that when she looked at the price she would have to pay to do this, that because it was the Supreme Court, she viewed it as of such great importance that she was willing to pay that price.
Mr. Paul?
Of course, I haven't discussed with Professor Hill, Senator, her reasons for coming forward, but I would imagine that if I were in her situation, when asked the question by an agent at the FBI, I would feel compelled to answer the question honestly as a servant of the court. I cannot imagine anything that Professor Hill could think to gain as a legal academician by coming forward. I think her career has frankly probably suffered as a result of her coming forward. I think that she had a very bright career. I think that if someone had asked me a few weeks ago, I would say that I could imagine Professor Hill coming before this committee in a very different capacity as a judicial nominee herself. I think her opportunities for that now have been destroyed. I think she paid a big price for her conscience.
I thank you, and I thank all four of you for coming forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Thurmond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here today.
I think it goes, Senator Thurmond, Senator Kohl is recognized now.
I'd like to ask you this question. From your testimony, it appears that none of you four witnesses have any personal knowledge of the charges made by Professor Hill against Judge Thomas, and that all you know about the matter is what Professor Hill told you. Is that correct?
I was not a precipiate witness, Senator.
What is that?
I was not a precipiate witness. I said, that is correct.
Miss Wells? Miss Wells?
That is correct, Senator.
Mr. Carr?
It's correct. I was not in the room.
Mr. Paul?
That is true, Senator.
That's all. Thank you very much. I yield the rest of my time to Specter.
Specter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When my time last expired, Judge Horstner, I was asking you to refer to page 5 of your prior testimony before the staff and a question where you said that, quote, at line 6 on page 5, quote, I did run into her very briefly at a professional conference in 1984, late December. And my question to you is, did you at that time ask Professor Hill anything about these alleged statements made by Judge Thomas?
I do not remember asking her that.
Judge Horstner, can you be any more specific than you have been about where you were at the time this conversation occurred, where you say Professor Hill made these statements about Judge Thomas's comments? We've been trying to fix the date, and it would be helpful if you were able to at least say where you lived at that time in an effort to try to pin that down. Can you help us on that?
Unfortunately, as I've explained to the FBI and here, I really cannot pin the date down. The one thing that I can be absolutely certain about is the fact that she was working for Clarence Thomas at the time because she stated that she was experiencing sexual harassment from her boss, Clarence.
Can you at least tell us whether you were living in Washington at the time you had that conversation with her?
I cannot pin down the date with any further specificity.
Judge Horstner, shifting over to the contacts you had with other people at or about the time you called Professor Hill on the day of Judge Thomas's nomination for the Supreme Court, had you received a call from anyone prior to the time you called Professor Hill asking her what she was going to do?
Absolutely not.
When did you have the first call, if any, from any member of the news media?
I'm trying to remember who called whom. The first person from the news media with whom I spoke was Nina Totenberg from National Public Radio and PBS.
What did she say to you?
And that was after Anita had already spoken to her. She just briefly asked me the same types of things that I'd been asked by the staff member of the chairman.
And what did you respond?
I responded with essentially the same information that I had given in my statement. I also asked her not to use my name.
Judge Horstner, you're not in a position to corroborate Professor Hill's statement that Judge Thomas spoke about acts that he had seen in pornographic films, are you?
I do not have an explicit memory of that.
Judge Horstner, are you in a position to corroborate Professor Hill's statement that Judge Thomas talked to her about such matters as women having sex with animals?
I do not have a memory of references to women having sex with animals.
Are you
what
in a
I
position?
do have a memory of is her telling me that he said to her, if we had any witnesses, you would have a perfect case against me.
Well, I understand that, and what I'm trying to do now is to go through the real essence or gravamen or testimony which Professor Hill gave against Judge Thomas to be sure that we understand you, because as I understand it, you do not, but I want to be sure. You said you can't corroborate her claim that Judge Thomas spoke to her about pornographic films. You can't corroborate Judge Thomas's statement about women having sex, etc., as I just said. Can you corroborate her claim that Judge Thomas spoke about pornographic materials depicting individuals with large sex organs?
No.
Can you corroborate her claim that Judge Thomas spoke to her graphically about his own sexual prowess?
No.
Can you corroborate her claim that Judge Thomas spoke to her about the odd episode, or Judge Thomas participated in the odd episode about drinking a Coke with the allegation of the pubic hair?
No.
Ms. Wells, are you in a position to corroborate Professor Hill's testimony that Judge Thomas spoke to her about pornographic films?
No, I am not.
Are you in a position to corroborate Professor Hill's claim that Judge Thomas spoke to her about women having sex, etc., with others than men?
No.
Are you in a position to corroborate that he talked about pornographic materials with large private parts?
No, I am not.
Are you in a position to corroborate that Judge Thomas talked to her about his own sexual prowess?
No, I am not.
Or about the Coke incident?
No, I am not.
And Mr. Carr, are you in a position to corroborate any of that?
Those are all consistent with the things she has told me, but I am not in a position to corroborate them specifically.
And Professor Paul, are you in a position to corroborate that Judge Thomas talked to Professor Hill about pornographic films?
No.
About any of the specifics I've asked Ms. Wells and Judge Horstner about?
All of that, Senator, would be consistent with sexual harassment, but she did not talk to me. I don't recall that she talked to me about any of those particulars.
Professor Paul, did you know prior to the time these hearings started that when Professor Hill accompanied Judge Thomas from the Department of Education to EEOC, that as a matter of fact, she had a classification at the Department of Education that she could have stayed there?
No, Senator.
Professor Paul, did you know that prior to the time that this hearing started that Professor Hills had made at least 11 calls which were recorded to Judge Thomas and others unrecorded?
No, Senator.
Did you know, Professor Paul, that Professor Hill drove Judge Thomas to the airport and was with him alone on that occasion in Oklahoma City or Tulsa?
No, Senator.
Did you know any of that, Mr. Carr?
No.
Did you know any of that, Ms. Wells?
No, Senator.
Did you know any of that, Judge Horstner?
I didn't hear her testify about driving him to the airport.
So you didn't know about that?
No, I do not know about that.
Judge Horstner, if you had a vote on Judge Thomas, yes or no, what would it be?
Senator, I don't have a vote here.
Ms. Wells, if you had a vote yes or no on Judge Thomas, what would it be?
Senator, the hearings are not over, and you have more witnesses for Anita Hill to hear, and I think then you would have a better understanding of her and why we are here saying that her allegations are true.
Mr. Carr, if you had a vote yes or no on Judge Thomas, what would it be?
Senator, I have not followed the hearings earlier before the Senate decided to delay, so I can't make an informed decision based on that. But I do believe the sexual harassment charges, and I think he would have to be one incredible jurist to get over my view that those are true. So I would vote no.
Would you want to hear the rest of the testimony?
I think if I was in the official position to make that choice, then I would definitely hear the rest of the
Professor Paul, you've already testified that when they came to you, you wouldn't sign a letter.
That's correct, Senator.
Do you have an opinion today? Would you vote yes or no on Judge Thomas?
If these allegations are proved true, Senator, I would say that he is not fit for the Supreme Court.
But you'd want to hear the rest of the evidence?
Yes, Senator.
So that none of you is in a position sitting there today without hearing the rest of the evidence to reject Judge Thomas solely on the basis of what Professor Hill has said.
I am in a position to do that.
But I thought you wanted to hear the rest of the evidence, Mr. Carr.
I said that I think it would be incumbent upon me to review all of the evidence, but that I have great difficulty imagining that he could be such a great jurist as to justify being confirmed in light of my belief that there was sexual harassment.
No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Kohl.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on what Senator Specter has been asking you, You are in a position, do I understand it, on the basis of your testimony today, to state as a matter of fact that Professor Hill informed you in a way that satisfied you that she was being sexually harassed by Judge Thomas, by Clarence Thomas. Is there any question in your mind about the clarity of the information that she provided to you, the sense that she provided to you, Judge Horschner?
There is no question in my mind that that happened.
In specific, did she tell you and corroborate to you that he had asked her out on numerous occasions in a manner that made her very uncomfortable and felt that she was being harassed?
Yes, she did.
Ms. Wells?
She did not get into exact detail. She helped me to understand that she was the recipient of inappropriate and offensive behavior in the office.
Mr. Carr?
My recollection at the time is that I believed her without question. Since recalling that conversation and listening to and hearing much of the testimony here, I have rethought that view, and I have racked my brain trying to understand it. Having done that, I nonetheless come back to the same position that I believe her.
There's no question in my mind, Senator, that she told me she was sexually harassed by her supervisor at the EEOC, and I believed her then, and I believe her still.
Has she ever discussed with you being sexually harassed by anybody else? Any other supervisor?
No,
Any
Senator.
other evidence except this evidence with respect to Clarence Thomas, Ms. Horschner?
She has never done so. She has been very poised in dealing with men and has had little trouble at laughing off or brushing off unwelcome advances. But in a situation like this, where there was such a gross inequity in power, she was not able to do so to her satisfaction.
Well, she ever discussed with you sexual harassment from anybody else?
No, never. Just concerning Judge Thomas.
Mr. Carr?
No, she didn't, but to be fair, we only discussed this for a brief period of time. It was our contact was over a limited period of time.
No.
Judge Horschner, I'd like to ask you a question, in as much as you are a judge, and I'm interested in your opinion on, in contrast to Anita Hill, who we discussed today, and the pain and the suffering that she's endured. From your vantage point as a judge, do you have any comment to make on the pain and the suffering that's been endured by Judge Thomas's family here? Can you give us some insight, offer some words?
Yesterday, Judge Thomas spoke here very eloquently about the pain that he has experienced. There is only one person to blame for that pain. I know no one who takes any joy in his suffering. His suffering is very apparent. There is, however, only one person to blame. It is not the press. It is not the person or persons who leaked the information. It is not Anita Hill. He is suffering as a result of his own actions. And there's another person who has been suffering much, much longer. She's suffering now. She was suffering 10 years ago, and she is not suffering as a result of her actions. And that person is Anita Hill.
Anybody else wish to comment on that? One more question. This is 1991. That was 1981. Any comment on how you think sexual harassment might be approached in our society today under similar circumstances from what it was 10 years ago? Are we 10 years further ahead, or are we in the same place? how do you imagine a woman might handle a similar situation today, Judge?
Senator, even today, a woman who is 23, 24 years old, as Anita was, just out of law school, working in a situation of such tremendous inequity of power, I really could not realistically advise her that she would have adequate protection were she to make a complaint.
Well,
I think there is, to a certain extent, a greater sensitivity among men about this. Not overwhelming, but there is a greater one. And so I have seen some progress to that extent. But if there's anything that will help women deal with this, I think it's the fact that women seem to rely so much more on one another and have a better understanding that you can come together and talk about this, and the best thing to do is to talk about it and to try to work together to resolve it and to realize that you are not the guilty party. And the sooner that you throw off that idea, the sooner you can get some healing and some closure to it.
Mr. Carr, anything different today from 10 years ago? If she would have called you today versus 10 years ago, discussed her problem with you, what might you have recommended differently today from 10 years ago?
I'm not sure how I would have differed today from then. I may well, at this point, being 10 years older and having a better sense of how my own career has gone and how careers do go, on the one hand, been extremely cautious in advising her about the risks. On the other hand, upon reflection, I may have been more supportive of her to take the risks. I really don't know.
Senator, as you know, the Supreme Court did not establish a hostile work environment as a cause of action until 1987, I believe. So that in that sense, perhaps we've made some progress in our understanding of the law. But I must admit, as a person who does not teach in this area and is not familiar with the law in this area, that 4 years ago when Anita Hill came to me and told me this story and said that she felt she had no recourse at the EEOC, I did not understand why. I think now, when I see what has happened to Professor Hill as a result of these hearings, as a result of coming forward, I can better understand why victims of sexual harassment don't feel that they have any recourse.
Well, I too want to thank you for coming here today. I think you've given us dramatic evidence of what it's like in our society today to be female and not powerful and not wealthy and still make an attempt to try and get by in our society, what the difficulties are in many cases. And in that respect, you've been very enlightening to me. I would like to hope my colleagues and to many millions of Americans. So I thank you for being here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Simpson?
It really will be much less than 5 minutes. The very puzzling thing here for me are you're all lawyers. And you're all lawyers telling us that the system does not work for sexual harassment. What a curious and extraordinary thing. It's 1991, and these laws have been on the books for years. And Joe Biden, our chairman, has been involved deeply in these issues. So have many of us. I have not on the issue of the subcommittee. Sexual harassment is talked about all over America. And you're telling us as 4 lawyers that the system doesn't work. And this is very troubling to me. Obviously, we have a great deal to do. I thought it worked. I thought if you went forward, that things took place. A consultation takes place, supervisors, anonymous, and these things take place. And you're saying just, it's like saying the process doesn't work. I can understand why the chairman bridles. The process does work. But you're telling us it doesn't. And I don't understand that in this day, in this city, that sexual harassment claims aren't done in the way the statute was drawn, in a sensitive way to get them expressed, to protect both the victim and the harasser. Because there is a pattern. If there is a pattern, we're told that psychologically, of the victim and their response, and there is also a pattern of the harasser. It's seldom a singular thing. Now that is the way it is, and that's what we're dealing with. And my question is this. I understood Ellen Wells very effectively and passionately described sexual harassment. Did you say, and I'm asking if I didn't hear rattling going, that you you said you had been touched. Did you bring a claim of sexual harassment? No, you said not. Okay, I'm sorry. Judge Horshner, have you ever brought a claim of sexual harassment?
There was an incident of sexual harassment where I now work, and the main victim of this complained through the internal system, and an investigation was done. I spoke to the investigator, and I wrote a statement which was not sent to the decision maker in that instance because the perpetrator and his attorneys had worked out a settlement, the terms of which are secret.
But you were involved in that some way.
I was involved in a very minor way.
Well, I'm not trying to be sinister. I was just thinking if you were involved in it where you were helping someone else with a sexual harassment charge, either as a counsel or friend, I'm wondering why you didn't help your closest friend, Anita Hill, when she was faced with the same information, and why you didn't give her that same counsel, and that is do something.
You're making an unwarranted assumption.
I'm not trying to, I'm just asking.
In this more recent situation, I did not counsel the person. And as I've said, I did try to help Anita. I tried to help her by listening and providing comfort. And apparently there was no comfort to be found.
Would you have done it differently now, knowing what you know, than what you did then?
If I were dealing with Anita at her present age, confidence, professional status, I would consider advising her to do something or say something. To be frank, I don't remember ever giving Anita advice about anything in my life.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I have a few questions, and there's still some more if you're prepared, and then we'll go down to whomever else has any. Let me ask each of you to answer each of these questions, if you would. Did Professor Hill ever complain to you that any other employer she had, or anyone else other than the nominee, had harassed her or had made unwanted sexual advances toward her? Had asked her for a date, anything? Can anyone, let's just go down the list. Judge?
I'll just repeat essentially the same thing that I said the last time I was asked that question. No, she has never complained of that. She was very poised and very capable of brushing off and laughing off unwanted sexual advances. In this situation, in part, I'm sure because of the great disparity in power, she was not able to successfully do that.
Ms. Wells?
She has never described to me a situation similar to this, or anyway remotely similar to this in terms of a work situation where a supervisor or a superior was making unwelcome advances.
Mr. Carr?
No, Senator.
Mr. Paul?
Yes, Senator.
Now, have any of you ever known under any circumstances, and you are under oath, has there been any circumstance in your relationship at any time with Professor Hill where you have known her to lie?
Absolutely not. Excuse me.
Never.
Never.
Absolutely not.
And it's an obvious question, but do any of you have any reason to believe, because there's been a lot of notions proffered here as to why Professor Hill, who is obviously made an impression of sincerity on the committee as well as many other people, there's been a lot of speculation as to, well, why, as has Judge Thomas come across as very forceful and sincere in his denials, do you have any reason to believe that any of the reasons that have been offered here, raised here, suggested here over the last several days as you've watched this, amount to anything other than she's simply just telling the truth and the facts as they occurred? Anyone?
Senator, if there were any desire on the part of Professor Hill for some sort of advancement in the profession of legal education, this whole proceeding was not the way to advance her career. She had tremendous opportunities. I feel confident that there were many law schools in this country that would have been happy to have offered Professor Hill a position prior to this proceeding. She chose to stay where she was because she wanted to be close to her family.
Do any of you, anyone else, have any reason, for example, does anybody have any reason to believe, and again, you're under oath, that, as been suggested by some here, that there's a possibility that Professor Hill is fantasizing? Is there anything in her background or character, in any aspect of your relationship with her, would lead you to believe, and remember, you are under oath, that she is possibly fantasizing about what happened?
She's one of the most truthful people that I know. She is not one subject to bouts of fantasy. At best, she might be a little sentimental, but to make up a story for what purpose? To bring this kind of public exposure to herself, it would not be in her character.
Senator, I certainly would echo that there's absolutely nothing in her character, as I recall, and that the things in her character that I do recall would not support the notion that she would fantasize.
What in her character do you recall that would not support the notion that she would not fantasize?
My recollection is that she is a very level-headed and factual person.
There's been suggested here the possibility that, and I know this has been raised, but I want it on the record, that she might be so ambitious that although Professor Paul, she would not be looking to advance her career this way, she might be looking to advance her financial situation by being able to turn this into a book or a movie. That's been suggested by some here. Is there any reason any of you would believe, anything in her character that would lead you to believe that's a possibility?
Senator, as I said earlier, I believe that the only book Professor Hill has any interest in writing would be a book on the Uniform Commercial Code. She is a private person, as has been testified already. I can't imagine her wanting to reopen this episode. She was so reluctant in her discussions with me, and moreover, once again, going back 4 years ago, in our discussion, there is no conceivable possible gain or advantage she could have imagined 4 years ago in a discussion with me in a university cafeteria about her coming to work at my university and telling me then that she left the EEOC because she was sexually harassed by her supervisor.
I'd like each of you to answer the question.
I can only imagine that the rationale for wanting to write a book would be fame or money. And I do not think those are significant motivations for Anita Hill. I don't believe she would have made the career choices she has made with the hope of somehow cashing in at some late date in her life. I think if she was motivated by money, she would have made different career choices.
Are you a partner in your law firm?
I am.
Without naming your law firm again, how large is your law firm?
It's about 430 lawyers, about 100 partners.
Would Anita Hill have any difficulty getting a job with your law firm?
Today she might, but I think that's a reference of the Economic Times. But I have no doubt I don't think she would have any difficulty getting a job at a major law firm, either in New York or in some other city.
Ms. Wells, with regard to the question of writing a book, anything in her background, did she ever indicate to you that, boy, I saw such and such a story, they turned that into a mini-series or whatever? I mean, is there anything?
There's nothing. I wouldn't even be tempted to say that she was particularly romantic in outlook. By that I mean she's not even the type, as I know her, to want to sit down and talk about the latest bestseller and get into the characterizations there and talk about how this character appeals to you, and as though that individual were real. I don't even think she likes soap operas. So,
does she enjoy, like some men and women do, gossip?
We never gossiped. She and I never gossiped, so I can't speak to that. And I mean, we knew many of the same people, and we never sat around talking about them and gloating over juicy tidbits. That wasn't in her nature.
Judge, it's been suggested by some as well that she just may be a very malleable person, that it was clearly suggested yesterday, at least as one possibility, that she had an ideological bent that was inconsistent with the nominee. She felt strongly about that, and that she found herself placed in the hands of interest groups who used her like putty to accomplish this ideological end that she felt was important to accomplish and they felt was important to accomplish. Is she that malleable a person, or is there anything in her character, and again you're under oath, and your knowledge of her to indicate to you that she is someone that is that malleable or so inclined?
Well, as I testified just a moment ago, I have never given her advice, and the reason is that she is so independent and that I respect her judgment so much that I would not presume to advise her. I cannot imagine a force that could take her and use her as a malleable object.
I say to my colleagues, I know my time is up. I only have two more questions. It may be useful for me to finish them if that's all right, and then move on to anybody else who may have questions. I like to ask the question of Mr. Carr and Mr. Paul. Mr. Paul, Professor Paul at the university, did you find her one that that was malleable, that shrunk from intellectual combat, that was easily able to have her opinions formed? I mean, is there any evidence of that?
I would not describe her as shrinking from an argument, no, Senator.
How would you describe her?
She is, in my impression, is that she's a very strong person. I think my impression of her is that she feels very deeply about her own being. She has a strong sense of roots, a strong sense of who she is and what she is, perhaps based on her religious upbringing, and she doesn't shrink from anything.
So notwithstanding the fact there may be a more senior professor who is sitting and having a discussion on a legal point, she is not the kind who would yield her opinion to...
That's correct, Senator.
Ad hominem argument?
She was in the summer that she was visiting at our school was the summer of the Judge Bork's nomination to the Supreme Court. As you recall, that was a very controversial nomination.
I had forgotten that. I'd like to forget that.
Members of my faculty were I would say, mostly opposed to the nomination, and in defending Judge Bork as she did at that time, she could not have thought she was advancing her opportunities to return to our school. She did so eloquently, she did so with tremendous force and conviction.
Mr. Carr, on the same point, was she strong-willed? Was she malleable? Was she someone who yielded to intellectual or any other kind of pressure?
I would not call her malleable. I don't recall strenuous intellectual debate with her.
I guess that wasn't what you had in mind. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. I wasn't trying to be facetious. I mean, it was a relationship you had different than Mr. I should drop this. I should drop that part. You understand what I mean. I'm being very serious. I mean, was there anything in her character that would lead you to believe that groups or individuals could use her for their advantage to promote another cause? That's what I'm trying to get at, because that's been raised here. It's been flatly suggested that's what happened.
I don't believe that would be possible. My recollections of Anita are that she had sort of fundamental basic beliefs about what was right and what was wrong, and I would venture to guess that these kind of sexual accusations were clearly wrong, and that she was not expedient or willing to subvert or change her views inconsistent with the way they in fact were.
I have one last area to cover. Did any of you attend her going away party that was, we've heard, testified to here at the EEOC when she had decided she was going to leave? Did anyone attend that party?
I attended a going away party at the Sheraton Carlton.
Was that the going away party? Do you recall? What was the purpose of the going away party?
Well, she was saying goodbye to her friends here.
To go to where?
To Oral Roberts.
To go to Oral Roberts University. Were anyone else at that party among the four of you?
No, she did tell me about it later.
Right. Do any of you know a Mr. Doggett? John Doggett?
No.
No.
I went to business school with John Doggett, and I would consider him a friend.
Do you know, did John Doggett ever indicate to you that he went out with, wanted to go out, or thought Miss Hill wanted him to go out with her?
No, I don't.
All right, I have no further questions now.
Senator, I don't believe anybody left except Senator Grassley.
Senator Brown?
Senator Specter had none, Senator Brown had none, the rest of them have none except Senator Grassley.
Well, maybe it's more a comment than a question. The lawyers on the committee refer to you folks as corroborating witnesses, and I guess, as I understand it, you're supposed to confirm what Professor Hills has alleged about Judge Thomas. There's no doubt in my mind that you folks are telling the truth, so I don't raise any fault with that you are telling us what Professor Hill told you. But it seems to me that in this role you do not confirm any sexual harassment by Judge Thomas of Professor Hill. And of course, you couldn't give any details about what Professor Hill says happened to her because she didn't give you any of these details. That's how I've been able to, as I sat here and listened to you. She just didn't fill in any details. So what would be very helpful to us, would be the confirmation of these details that she expressed the other day. But I guess I also find it surprising that you didn't really offer any advice to her, but I guess Senator Simpson covered that point. It seems to me that someone as forthright and just referred to also as independent as Professor Hill wouldn't have given some details if they really happened. It just doesn't make sense that she simply told her friends or acquaintances that she was being harassed at work, and that's it. That's it. It just doesn't seem to fit. I guess I would have maybe one question, not following up on that, but just one question. Senator Specter asked, and I guess I would ask everybody but Mr. Carr this. He asked if you would vote for. You didn't want to express a view if you'd vote for. I want to know, do you want to see Judge Thomas on the Supreme Court? And I'd start with you, Judge Hirschner.
Senator, I'm only here to tell the truth about what I was told back in the early 1980s. You've heard the truth today, and it's up to you to decide what to do with it.
Ellen Wells.
I echo what the judge says. I'm here to give you this information that I know to be the truth. And for me to sit here and to say what my personal opinions may be about Judge Thomas's qualifications for the Supreme Court, I think would not be appropriate. It would not answer to what I'm here for.
Professor Paul.
Senator, as a legal scholar and an attorney, I've been asked the question many times prior to these allegations whether or not Judge Thomas should be confirmed. I did not take a position then. I am not taking a position now. I am simply here to tell the truth about what I was told by Professor Hill 4 years ago, that she was sexually harassed by her supervisor at the EEOC.
Well, you said you didn't sign a letter. I'm kind of puzzled. If you have reason to believe that Judge Thomas is a sexual harasser or guilty of sexual harassment, why wouldn't you sign a letter against it?
Well, first of all, Senator, I was asked to sign the letter prior to these allegations. Second of all, Senator, I believe that Professor Hill told me the truth in 1987. But I believe that you, Senator, and the other members of this committee, sitting here trying to determine the facts, should wait to hear all the evidence before making a determination. As I said in response to Senator Simpson's question, if Judge Thomas, in fact, committed the acts alleged, then I don't think that he should be confirmed. If he did not commit the acts alleged, I have no position.
Well, I guess maybe I can't go any further and ask you further if you don't want to answer my question, but I can tell you at least why I ask. It seems to me, as I understand lawyers, you take an oath to uphold the Constitution and your in practicing your profession, particularly you, Professor Paul. You're a student of the Constitution and of the Supreme Court decisions. It seems to me like people in your position ought to have a personal view of whether or not Judge Thomas ought to be on the Supreme Court, and that you'd welcome an opportunity to express it, and that you would think that for a non-lawyer like me, it'd be important for me to know it to determine whether or not you've got any bias.
Senator, I didn't have the opportunity during the original round of hearings to review the record, but if you'd like me to review the record, I'll be happy to come back and present you with my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions. Senator Leahy.
Chairman, I would note on the question of whether Mr. Paul, because he's a lawyer and has taken an oath as a lawyer, should be telling us how to vote on this. There are only 100 people in this country who have taken an oath that requires them to vote on this confirmation. And 14 of them are here. We're the only ones who must state an opinion. I don't want to leave any kind of impression out there simply because somebody's a lawyer. They must have an opinion on whether Judge Thomas goes on the Supreme Court or not. There are only 100 people who have taken the oath of office that requires them to vote on it. And Judge Hirschner, not going into everybody's testimony, you said you came here to tell the truth, and that we should use that truth. None of you said you saw the activity. The nature of the activity is such that nobody would have. But each of you have testified that years ago, Anita Hill came to you and told you of that. I just remind everybody who's watching these proceedings, corroboration is this: the woman who was sexually harassed is not going to go and tell you people that so that someday, 9 or 10 years later, you'd be in this room to tell about it. But you are, and we will use your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hatch.
Professor Paul, I've deliberately stayed out of asking any questions, but I've been intrigued when Professor...
The hearing coverage will continue after we have an opportunity to hear these messages.
Mona Lisa, men have named you
Nat King Cole.
You're so like the lady.
His rich, warm voice brought a special magic to every song.
Smile.
Now, in a beautiful two-record treasury, Heartland Music presents the legendary voice of Nat King Cole.
Answer me, oh my love. Just what sin have I been guilty of when I fall in love?
24 unforgettable songs.
It will be forever.
All his best-loved hits.
Ramblin' Road.
2 beautiful albums. In the most complete Nat King Cole collection ever.
They try to tell us we're too young.
Every song brings back a special memory.
Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer.
But remember,
unforgettable.
This classic Nat King Cole collection is not sold in any store. Please stay tuned to order yours now.
Sometimes I wonder I spend.
To order, call toll-free 1-800-257-1257.
to save all COD charges and pay only $12.98 for records or cassettes or $16.98 for compact disc, plus $3 shipping. Use your credit card or send check or money order to Nat King Kohl, P.O. Box 8250, Atlanta, Georgia. Remember, save COD charges by sending check or money order or use your credit card.
This is CNN.
We return now to the hearings for Judge Thomas. It's been more than 5 hours that a panel of 4 of her former colleagues and supporters have been testifying, and now senators are asking them questions about their testimony. Senator Simpson.
I asked you if you had ever filed a charge of sexual harassment. I don't think you indicated to me that you had. I have a record from California in Norwalk County or Norfolk County, California, that you did file a claim against a fellow judge, a man named Judge Foster. Is that correct?
I was not sure how far in the proceedings that went. It was my understanding that he had negotiated a settlement. I was told that my statement was never taken up to the home office of our board.
But you did file a claim of sexual harassment against a fellow judge within your system.
I can't say that I didn't. I did not fill out any papers. It's possible that the result of my having spoken to the investigator was taken as filing a claim within our system, and in that case that would be correct.
But he did eventually resign, and the process of his resignation and the activities around that were rather widely publicized within that county, weren't they?
The terms of the settlement were secret, were supposed to be secret. I am not aware of the full extent of them.
Well, again, I'm interested only in your intent to do those things, and you feel strongly about it, and I'm wondering why that counsel was not given to your friend.
Senator Kohl, did you have... Yes, just one quick question. Yesterday, Judge Thomas said that there was a plot afoot in this country to derail his nomination to the Supreme Court. As I hear your comments today, it's obvious to me that if there was a plot afoot, it must have originated 10 years ago. So, do you think that Anita Hill plotted for as long as 10 years ago to derail Judge Thomas's nomination to the Supreme Court?
I think that would have been impossible.
The same, Senator. That would have been impossible and unthinkable.
I don't believe that it's possible.
No, Senator. She would be not only deserving of an Academy Award, but she'd be a prophet.
He yesterday did, as you know, if you followed his testimony, he made a very, very big point of stating that what was happening here was that there was a huge plot among Anita Hill and others to see to it that he never achieved his nomination. And are you saying that you regard that sort of an analysis on his part to be almost out of the question?
Senator, I'd like to point out that the members of this panel met when they walked into this room. So in order for us to have been part of a conspiracy or a plot, we needed to have met one another at some point to get our facts straight and whatever. And we did not have that opportunity.
That's correct,
That is
Senator.
correct.
I agree with that.
That's correct, Senator. We don't know each other.
You've never met before you met here today?
I've never met any of these people before.
We met yesterday.
Yesterday when we
You
walked
met
into
yesterday
the
for the
room.
first time.
That's correct.
Right.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, any other questions? There being none, I want to thank this panel very, very much. We've kept you a long time, over 5 hours. Now we're going to recess for 5 minutes, but I want to call the next panel of witnesses to come forward while we do this. The next panel will be J.C. Alvarez, Nancy Fitch, Diane Holt, and Phyllis Barry Myers. Will reconvene in 5 minutes.
There we have it, the chairman taking a 5-minute recess here in the proceedings, and meantime the next panel of 4 supporters of Judge Clarence Thomas are to come on and undergo somewhat the same procedure. This has been 5 hours of questioning of 4 friends of Anita Hill. Bob Franken has been watching all of this from his perspective right near the hearing room, and let's bring him in now. Bob?
Right now, there is a lot going out in the hallway. The supporters of Anita Hill are describing the fact that they have polygraph test results that would support her contentions about Judge Thomas. They're making those announcements right now. We'll bring you details in a few minutes. Also out in the hallway, milling around with them, are these were the supporters of Anita Hill, is what I was saying, that they have polygraph results that would support her contentions about Judge Thomas. There are also Judge Thomas supporters milling around in the hallway, and they are complaining that they have been kept waiting. This was supposed to go 3 hours, and then they were supposed to come on. It's already gone 5 hours, and their complaint is that they're being, in effect, muscled out of the evening news period. So there's an awful lot going on, as I said. We've just completed a 5 hours worth of testimony of a panel. David, of course, as we all know, they came out strongly in support of Anita Hill's position, and basically corroborated it, they said, by saying that over the years that she had complained to them about sexual harassment from Clarence Thomas. David?
We'll be coming back to examine more of these details right after this.
Ford Motor Company profiles in quality, vision.
Quality of the glass that goes into our cars is so important, we make it ourselves.
No other car company in the world does that.
Ford glass has to pass over 110 quality inspections. Our people check it, our lasers check it, our robots check it.
Our glass is so good, it not only goes into our cars, many other automakers put it in their cars.
Our goal is to build the highest quality cars and trucks in the world.
At Ford, quality is job one.
Why should I have to wait a week for my dealer to fix my brakes just because I own a foreign car?
For foreign car brakes, Midas gets the job done right, and right away.
I wouldn't settle for anything less than the right parts.
Midas stocks the right brake parts for practically every foreign car.
So I went to Midas.
Midas brake technicians are trained experts. That's why we guarantee every brake shoe and pad for as long as you own your foreign car. Nobody beats Midas. Nobody.
You probably know the PV and PV Max don't mean plywood bobsled. In a pretend blizzard. And it don't mean phony biceps. The PV means peanut butter, straight from the jar, real creamy peanut butter with a crunchy whole grain cookie and pure milk chocolate. Now that's a real snack. And that's why PV Max is the official snack food of the real U.S. bobsled team. PV Max, we mean peanut butter.
How does your Genie screwdriver door opener work?
You got this big screw, see? And it's real long, and the thing just turns like that, so the door slides real quiet.
Any mom with a lot of kids could use a Genie.
Genie screwdriver, built for a lifetime.
On CNN tonight, 70 years to build, 3 days to take down. The changing Soviet Union inside a Europe on the brink. Then on Inside Business, making cosmetics that are naturally friendly. All tonight on CNN.
In her direct testimony the other day, Anita Hill said she would be willing to take a lie detector test on all of the issues before this hearing. Apparently she has taken a lie detector test, and the man who knows about it, perhaps the one who administered it, is at the stakeout position on Capitol Hill now, Paul Miner. Paul Miner, we will listen to. He is a polygraph expert. He has just said here that she didn't appear to him to be psychotic or out of contact with reality. She answered several questions on the polygraph test. Let's listen and see what we can hear.
Prior to that. Background, where you, how you developed work in this area, who have you worked for previously?
As I think I mentioned before, I was trained by the Army in 1972, and I was with the Army up until 1978 when I went over to the FBI. I headed their program from 1978 to the end of 1987, or almost to the end of September of 87 when I left.
Have you had cases where you later found out that the polygraph did not accurately report?
I've heard of such cases, but I don't know if that I have ever had one. I don't think so.
You don't know Ms. Hill? You've never met Ms. Hill or her defense team? You've never had any dealings with them at all?
I had never met them until this morning, mid-morning. I spoke to Mr. Ogletree last evening, late, for the first time.
Where was this test done, please?
That was done at the office of Charles Ruff.
What do you want to know? What do you do now?
What do I do now? I own and operate American International Security Corporation in Fairfax, Virginia.
How long did this take? And tell us a little bit about the process, if you would.
We started at 11 a.m. this morning and completed the test at 1:15 this afternoon.
All that time continuously in this test?
Testing and conversing, arriving at an understanding of issues.
Some of the questions, were there any other questions asked?
There were other questions having to do with irrelevant issues, control questions and so forth, but those were the meaningful issue questions, and that's a complete listing of them. None are left out. Deception was not shown to any relevant question, nothing like that.
When you say deception wasn't shown to any relevant question, was there deception indicated on any other matters?
That wouldn't be appropriate. All of the relevant issues we have gone into, and others were built in for ambiguity and so forth, but it's not appropriate that I address those at this time.
Mr. Ogletree.
Yes.
What you think this establishes and what you think should happen? Should Clarence Thomas now take one?
No, I am not, nor do we suggest that Judge Thomas take a polygraph test. Judge Thomas should not be obligated to do that. No Supreme Court nominee should be obligated to do that. I think that is inappropriate. The point here is that Ms. Hill's character and credibility has been assailed from the beginning. Ms. Hill, before I represented her, before she spoke with any counsel, told the FBI that she was willing to take a polygraph. Ms. Hill told Congress in the hearings this week that she was willing to take a polygraph. It was my judgment, given the accusations that had been made over the last few days about fantasy, about grudges, about being a martyr, about light-skinned versus black-skinned women, that this had just gone too far, and that Professor Hill, in my opinion, had to fish or cut bait. And if she wanted to address this issue, we would give a test. She would live by the results, whatever those results were. I should add that Mr. Minor is not the expert I would have called. I called Charles Ruff, who was here, who was the former president of the District of Columbia Bar. He is a former United States attorney for the District of Columbia. He has considerable experience in litigation. I suggested to Mr. Ruff that I wanted somebody who's going to be tough, who's going to scrutinize Ms. Hill, who's going to ask all the probing questions, and who would be able to settle for once and for all, for our satisfaction, whether or not Mrs. Hill, whether or not Professor Hill was truthful when she related the incidents about sexual harassment. And his questions were designed to specifically focus on what she said, what she had observed, what she had been told, whether she'd been asked to go out on dates, whether or not she had been had conversations about the size of Judge Thomas's penis. Those were the issues that she'd been probed on, and a lot of other collateral issues have been raised. She has testified about those issues. She has taken a polygraph test. She now knows that it was successful, that Mr. Minor, the leading expert on polygraph examination, one used by the government for many years, trained most FBI experts in the country during his time, has performed this test, and we offer it only for our concern to make it clear that Ms. Hill, Professor Hill, in our judgment, needed to have this issue clarified, and she is very pleased. We are pleased, and we hope this issue is put behind us. I'd like to ask Mr. Ruff if he would, I'd like to ask Mr. Ruff if he would to say something if he would because of his involvement in this, if he would.
Well, I don't know that there's a lot to say. I spoke to Mr. Ogletree last night. I told him that I knew someone who would conduct a polygraph examination, but that this was a man who would call them the way he saw them, that would tell us what the results were without shading them in any way, because we were the ones who were retaining him. I told them that I knew the man who had run the Bureau operation and that I would seek his assistance. Mr. Minor happily agreed to do that, and we're here today to give you those results.
Professor Ogletree, will this be introduced?
We're not
introduced?
No, we're not seeking to introduce this in evidence. This is not a trial. It's not available in a trial. Our concern has always been, for Professor Hill's concern, to be able to show that she's telling the truth. You also have today, independent of this test, the witnesses who testified today. And I think it's clear that no one can question in any serious way the 4 witnesses who came forward today. Our concern had been to put this issue straight for Professor Hill. She is pleased that it was resolved in her favor. She knows the risk of being shown to be deceptive. There is no evidence, nor has there ever been any, about any mental incapacity of Professor Hill. The only time that suggestion ever came up was today when Senator Danforth mentioned it. I think from our point of view, it puts the issue to rest. We are not asking that Judge Thomas do anything. It's simply, from our point of view, to allow Professor Hill to finish her testimony if she goes back, and to go back to her life as a professor at Oklahoma University Law Center.
Then what will you say to the countercharge, which will never be raised, that this is just TV?
No, we are not. I've been asked that question 3 times. We are not asking. Let me be perfectly clear. Supreme Court nominees should not, in my view, my personal view, be required to take polygraph examinations. That's not what this is about. Every senator has been talking about there's a credibility issue here. We're not trying to prove facts, assume any burden. It is simply to allow Professor Hill to have a person that we don't know, a person recommended by a distinguished member of this bar, one of the most respected lawyers in this country, a person who has worked with the FBI and trained many FBI agents, to tell us whether or not Professor Hill, in his professional judgment, was deceptive on the critical questions that led to this proceeding. And we have no further questions.
Thank you very much. Reliability, polygraph as a trial lawyer.
So a rather stunning development, at least in terms of timing, after listening to 5 hours of testimony of Anita Hill's former colleagues and friends attest to the truthfulness of her person in the past and her character, after listening to them tell that some of the allegations she brought forward against Judge Thomas here were made to them in private, perhaps for solace, as many as 10 years ago, and not contemporaneously as they might have been cooked up by public interest groups or anyone else. That Anita Hill has now taken, as she volunteered to do earlier in testimony, a lie detector test, and the experts who administered that test and her attorney saying that she passed it in flying colors. And the timing, Bob Franken, as we go back to you on the Hill, is stunning too, because it came to cap those 5 hours.
Well, it did, as a matter of fact. It is, in the realm of public relations, a really successful move, because what they've done, they've sort of captured the headline, at least up to now, and they've also probably in advance preempted the Thomas supporters from undermining the credibility of Professor Anita Hill. The next panel we would expect would be Judge Thomas supporters who would be trying to corroborate Judge Thomas's response. By the way, if you hear noise in the background, the Redskins fans they've won a football game, and our luck, they happen to be driving past the Capitol right now. Let's review the questions that the lie detector test, the polygraph expert, says that she answered, and the machine showed that she was answering them truthfully. Have you deliberately lied to me about Clarence Thomas? She said no. Polygraph expert said that, in fact, she had answered that truthfully. As she did, are you fabricating, let me see if I can get the wind to stop blow here, are you fabricating the allegation that Clarence Thomas discussed pornographic material with you? The answer was no. He says she was truthful. Are you lying to me about the various topics that Clarence Thomas outlined to you regarding specific sexual action? The answer, no. The polygraph expert said she passed that test. Are you lying to me about Clarence Thomas making reference to you about the size of his penis? Again, the answer is no. She said, and the polygraph expert said she was telling the truth. And he says there was no indication of deception to me on any of the relevant questions. That's a quote from the document. Of course, there are any number of what they call control questions. The reason for that in a polygraph test is to get some idea of what the reactions are when they show up on the machine. So as you said, David, we have quite a spectacular development here. So I suspect now that the debate not only is going to concern Professor Anita Hill and Judge Clarence Thomas, but also just how valuable polygraph tests are. We also heard, of course, from her attorney, who said that they are not asking Clarence Thomas to take a polygraph test, but the question remains now, will he feel obligated to take one?
And let's go to Mary Tillotson, who's been tracking this all from the White House today, where they have been hanging tough with Judge Thomas and doing their best to put their spin on what these last four witnesses that we've just heard have been saying. This, Mary, though, puts quite a big ball, a medicine ball, right in their court.
Yes, it does, David. I think we can assume, coming out of Bob Franken's suggestion, that it is unlikely that Clarence Thomas will submit to a lie detector test. I think he would see that demeaning at this point, or at least claim that such a test would be demeaning for a Supreme Court nominee. But it has been abundantly clear since Friday's testimony before the Judiciary Committee that either Judge Thomas or Anita Hill are lying for whatever reason. And the testimony before the Judiciary Committee today was certainly from four witnesses who maintained that it is not she who is lying about what their conversations, if any, concerning sex were back in the 1980s. What we're already hearing from some of the Republican supporters of Judge Thomas on Capitol Hill would seek to undercut the results of the lie detector test which Anita Hill took, a test which purports to show that it is she who's telling the truth. And that Republican theory is that she is suffering from some delusion, perhaps a martyr complex, perhaps she is so embittered against Judge Thomas that she truly believes he was sexually harassing her when, in their opinion, he was not. The theory being that even if she took a lie detector test, it wouldn't prove the truth in a factual, concrete way because she doesn't know what the truth is. That is what we are likely to hear Republican senators attempt to persuade the television audience when the hearings resume a bit from now. David?
Mary and Bob, let me remind our viewers that the committee has taken what was a 5-minute break about 6 minutes ago, as is the wont on Capitol Hill. We're joined now in the studio here with our analyst, Bill Schneider, who's been watching all of this along with you there in the field and me here in the studio with him. The lie detector test issue, Bill, what's your first thought?
Well, it's important for viewers to understand that lie detector test results are not normally admissible in a court of law. This is not a court of law. It's not a trial. And, of course, they didn't submit it as evidence even before this hearing. But these tests are not known to be infallible. And, in fact, the administration may well argue that her state of mind is such that she may have convinced herself she's telling the truth. In any case, these test results are not infallible, and if it were a trial, it wouldn't be used. This was clearly public relations, and I must say that the timing and the results do help to corroborate her claim.
One of her attorneys, one of Anita Hill's attorneys, Charles Ogletree, said that the primary motive for having her take the lie detector test was the impugning of her character repeatedly in the hearing yesterday and the day before. Is this a good way to do it?
Well, I think to the ultimate jury, which is the American electorate, the American public watching this, who according to the polls believe that find Clarence Thomas more believable than Anita Hill, they're seeking some way to turn that balance around. And one way to do it is to give some scientific evidence that it is at least consistent with the view that she's telling the truth.
Word of this may have filtered into the committee, for they're certainly not gaveling it back into session in 5 minutes, as they said. Perhaps they'll have something to say on this when they come back. Bob Franken is closest to that scene. Let's return to him now. Bob.
Well, first of all, they have kind of a monumental task here. This has gone, the first round of questioning went 2 full hours longer than they thought it was going to go. So they do have a difficult task of deciding now what they want to do for the rest of the day and what kind of schedule they want to do tomorrow. Also, one other thing, Charles Ogletree left a strong suggestion that Anita Hill may want to return to testify tomorrow. We are hearing that in fact is the case, that she is strongly considering returning. And I think this plays into what Bill just said, that so far, because Clarence Thomas has had the last word, he seems to be prevailing right now. But we must remember that Professor Anita Hill is a very strong presence herself, and maybe her strategists are now saying that if she's going to prevail in this debate, she needs to come back and, in effect, use her telegenic magic again.
What can we say about this next panel that's coming on, Bob and Bill? We've heard them named by the chairman, J.C. Alvarez from River North Distributing in Chicago, Nancy Fitch of Philadelphia, Diane Holt of Washington, D.C., who formerly worked with Judge Thomas and with with her, and Phyllis Berry Myers. This next panel is a pro-Thomas character witness panel, as the other one was for her. And what do you expect, Bob?
Well, this is to differentiate from the character witness panels we're supposed to be hearing from later. This is supposed to be a corroborative panel. My guess is, in fact, I can tell you what we're going to hear. A is material about Judge Thomas and his relationship with Professor Anita Hill when she worked with him, their observations, whatever, quote, corroboration we can get. Again, I'll remind you, all that noise is from Redskins fans returning from the game. The other thing we might hear are people who are going to talk about their impressions of the personality of Anita Hill. So that's the kind of corroborative panel we should expect next.
Bill Schneider, it's not as noisy with car horns here. Nothing about the Redskins if you live in Washington or near Washington. That could be that awful word. But it means that not everyone in America is as tied up with this hearing procedure as we are. Going back over the last 5 hours, what struck you most about those 4 witnesses that we heard, and about the way, certainly toward the end, a couple of the senators tried to get it clearly on the record that no, they didn't hear any direct evidence. They were friends.
Yeah, I was impressed with Senator Specter's attempt to demolish their credibility by asking them very detailed questions, and it was a real skillful exercise in lawyering on his part when he asked them specific questions where the answer had to be yes or no. Did she tell you about this detail? Did she tell you about the Coke bottle? Did she say this? They could only answer yes or no, and the answer repeatedly was no, no, no. And then it was left to other senators to conclude, well, therefore, they really weren't corroborating very much. They weren't there when the incident happened. She didn't give them any details. There was another skillful point of lawyering, I thought, when Senator Specter said, would you support or oppose the nomination of Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court? Now, they were really on the spot there, because if they said, I would vote no against Thomas, that meant they were biased. But at the same time, because most of them, I think all of them did, said that refused to take a position, that is, they said, I would not vote no, he was left to conclude, you wouldn't vote to oppose him? A man who you believe committed an act of sexual harassment, and you're not driven to the conclusion that he should not be on the Supreme Court? What kind of witnesses are you? It was a brilliant piece of prosecution.
We have to consider, we have to keep in mind what I think I want to start calling the 51% factor. That is to say, 51% of the American electorate is female. And it is still an open question how they've been affected by all this and what it might mean at the polls. I can tell you that I've talked to some Republican strategists, and they say that they're very nervous about the uncertainty about this.
All right, Bob and Bill and Mary, we'll be back in a moment. We have to take this break, and the hearing is about to resume, we think. We'll be here for that, too. But first, this.
I started riding the bus about 15 years ago for economic reasons. Now I ride for the convenience.
Dependability. You can always count on the Metro in any kind of weather.
And it's really safe because they drop you off right where you want to be.
Riding the Metro saves me from having to buy a second car.
And the money I save, I just go shopping.
The Metro, dependable, convenient, economical. No need to fill up as much.
We've got a nifty way to leave your auto.
It's what's new in 92. It's the most exciting event in the history of your local Ford dealer, and it's going on now. More new vehicles than ever before. Ford Taurus, dramatically redesigned with a sleeker exterior and a plush new interior. Ford Escort, America's favorite compact car, is now available in a sedan. What's new in 92? Cash back and low financing, all new bumper-to-bumper warranty. Don't miss your chance for great savings on the full line of Ford cars and trucks. See what's new in 92 at your local Ford dealer today.
This is CNN.
It's been a long afternoon here in Washington as the search for the truth in the case of Clarence Thomas and whether he should ascend to the Supreme Court continues over who is telling the truth, his former employee or himself about allegations of sexual harassment. Here in the studio is Bill Schneider, the CNN analyst, to discuss the 4 witnesses this afternoon, and maybe look forward a bit later if we have time, because the hearing could resume at any moment, the 4 witnesses that will be in the judge's behalf. As we return to looking at the 4, we heard toward the end of the 5-hour session that one of them, who is a judge in California, an administrative judge, had brought a similar case, which hadn't made it to the public wheel very much, of sexual harassment against a fellow judge. How much do you think that knocks her back?
Well, the question that was raised is, if she brought a complaint of sexual harassment against someone, why didn't she advise Anita Hill? In fact, that was one of the central mysteries the Republicans were trying to probe. Why didn't they advise Anita Hill to take action? Why didn't she seek advice? They're all lawyers. This is a woman who has brought a charge of sexual harassment, and yet she didn't advise someone else who was clearly distraught by this?
That was Susan Horschner. Our colleague Bob Franken is at his position with Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont, who of course has been even closer than we have to everything this afternoon. Go ahead, Bob.
As a matter of fact, Senator Leahy just reminded me that he was the senator who asked her whether she would be willing to take a lie detector test, and now she has. What do you think the impact is, Senator?
Well, you know, I was struck by the fact that in her testimony, she said that she was asked by the FBI if she would take a polygraph, and she said unhesitatingly, yes, I would. That sort of struck a chord in my mind. Now I see that she has, and it speaks to the question of credibility. I know the years when I was a prosecutor, I had a number of occasions where somebody claimed innocence on charges had been brought against them. We brought them in, took a polygraph. They passed the polygraph. I had enough faith in it to drop the charges.
Well, let me ask this, sir. As an attorney, you know that most court systems do not accept into evidence polygraphs, and that's because they're not considered absolutely reliable. How credible how much credibility can we give to this?
Well, they're not admitted into it. I think it goes more to the fact that the FBI themselves were the first ones, according to her testimony, who asked her, would you take a polygraph? She said yes. And most people who have not worked with polygraphs, and she has not, when they hear about a polygraph, they say, boy, they put that thing on me, they're going to know my innermost secrets. She said, I'm perfectly willing to take one. Now she's actually gone through with that. She said that under oath. She's gone through with it now. It may not be admissible into a court of law, but it's certainly going to weigh heavily on the minds of a lot of senators.
Well, now we have a day where friends of both are, in effect, testifying as to the credibility of both. What does that do to today's proceeding?
Well, I think that we've had one panel, and I hesitate very much, and I've tried not to do a sort of a who's up now, who's down, who's up, who's down. And I won't, because it's going to be the totality that's going to tell us what's going on. But you've heard 4 powerful witnesses this afternoon, all with nothing whatsoever to gain about it, all saying that Anita Hill told them about this years and years and years ago. One doesn't plan 9 years ahead of time so that their testimony can be heard 9 years later in the Supreme Court. Nobody has that kind of a crystal ball. Or we heard before the Senate, nobody has that kind of a crystal ball. I think the testimony this afternoon does go to Anita Hill's credibility. It does boost her credibility. And now we're going to hear from a panel that will speak in favor of Judge Thomas. That also has to be weighed.
Let me ask, however, a question about whether or not these things could happen and she still might not be telling the truth. That is to say, she might have told her friends, she might have passed the polygraph test because she is such a confirmed liar, a pathological liar, this is what the critics would say, that she would in fact believe the lies.
Everybody there says she's not a woman given to fantasies, not a woman given to flights of fancy, and somebody who appears to be very, very honest. Certainly there was nothing that appeared otherwise here. It also could well be, yes, this happened. It is deeply painful to her. She remembers it well, and Judge Thomas might know what happened and has put that out of his mind. I mean, that can work either way. You can make the same argument, of course, for him and against her. That's one of the most difficult things in this. But we do know this, that 8 or 9 years ago, she spoke of this happening with Clarence Thomas. And now people come here under oath to say she did that. And she spoke of it then, and she's spoken of it again now. That's an awful long time to carry a falsehood around one's heart.
I'm assuming you would not call for Clarence Thomas to also take a polygraph test.
No, that's You know, I didn't call for anybody to take a polygraph, for that matter. I just asked her if she had said she was willing to. She said yes, and apparently she did. No, he's under no obligation whatsoever to take one, and if he does not take one, it should not be held against him.
If you were his strategist, this of course will be quite a leap here, but if you were his strategist, would you consider doing so?
They have not asked me to be a strategist. I don't think it'd be fair for him. I mean, I've stated I was going to vote against him, not on this episode, but even before this ever came to light, I was going to vote against him on other reasons. It wouldn't be fair to him for me to say what I would advise him. I would simply say this, that he is under no obligation whatsoever to take a polygraph.
Before these test results were released, it was generally conceded that, in fact, if we can characterize it as a battle, Judge Thomas was winning. It looked like those Democrats who were voting for him before were inclined now to continue voting for him. What effect might this have on you?
Well, every senator is going to analyze for himself or herself what the polygraph test means. And every senator is going to have to answer that question. I still go back. I would hope that nobody loses sight. There is still the debate whether the man, with or without this incident, is qualified to be in the Supreme Court. That's somehow gets lost in this whole shuffle. Was the polygraph results, is this going to have a major effect? If it turns out that the person given the polygraph was qualified, if it was done in an appropriate and qualified sense of way, law enforcement, the FBI, and others do it, then it's going to have a heck of an effect.
One last question. We are hearing now that Professor Anita Hill, may decide to return tomorrow. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, we're trying to finish up everybody tonight so that tomorrow can be clear for either Anita Hill or Judge Thomas or both if they want to come back.
Is it your understanding that we should expect somebody tomorrow?
Well, I don't know. That's going to be up to those two principals, but I would hope that the day would be cleared so that they would be the only ones to testify. At some point, this has got to end because we still got to vote on this Tuesday.
Senator Patrick Leahy, Democrat of Vermont, an opponent of Clarence Thomas's confirmation for the Supreme Court. Thank you very much for being with us, Senator. David?
Bob and Senator, thank you very much. It was just a few minutes ago, right near where they were just then, and again we remind our viewers that the cheering in the background is from the nearby Redskins game, which is just over, and the avenue which leads from the stadium goes right by the balcony where they were talking. We have a piece of tape now from Anita's lawyer, and he was asked what specific questions on the lie detector test were administered to her. Let's listen.
And his questions were designed to specifically focus on what she said, what she had observed, what she had been told, whether she'd been asked to go out on dates, whether or not she had been had conversations about the size of Judge Thomas's penis. Those were the issues that she'd been probed on, and a lot of other collateral issues have been raised. She has testified about those issues. She has taken a polygraph test. She now knows that it was successful, that Mr. Minor, the leading expert on polygraph examination, one used by the government for many years, trained most FBI experts in the country during his time, has performed this test, and we offer it only for our concern to make it clear that Miss Hill, Professor Hill, in our judgment, needed to have this issue clarified.
Professor Anita Hill's attorney telling of the lie detector test, which she took today from approximately noon until 1:30 Eastern Time here in the Washington area, administered by an expert, a former trainer of FBI polygraph administrators, and that is a stunning, at least public relations development. It may or may not have more sway over the future of the proceedings, which are now in hold. We're between panels, and the committee is now deciding what to do next and in what order to go. On that note, we'll pause for this.
Victory comes in a moment, but excellence is built over time, performing again and again. Over the past 50 years, that's what has earned Northwestern Mutual Life the best record for financial strength, combined with top financial performance. For our policy owners, it's meant unsurpassed security, year after year. Isn't that the kind of strength and security you're looking for? Northwestern Mutual Life.
Good morning, room service.
Yes,
o'clock, at 11. Waiting.
Yes, sir, your breakfast is on the way.
Should have been half an hour ago.
Sorry, sir, it'll be there any minute.
You sure?
Absolutely. What was that number again?
Recently, DuPont announced that its energy unit Conoco would pioneer the use of new double-hulled oil tankers in order to safeguard the environment. The response has been overwhelmingly positive. DuPont, better things for better living.
On the edge at 125 miles per hour on National Geographic Explorer. 9 Eastern tonight, exclusively on TBS.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Mann. Like many Americans, President Bush says he's been glued to the television set watching the Thomas hearings, and he said there was a certain uncleanliness about the proceedings. The president also said when he nominated Thomas to the Supreme Court, he warned him the confirmation process would be tough, but never dreamed it would be this bad. The president said the American people are in the corner of Clarence Thomas.
Thank God he's decided to put off with even more abuse and go through more of this. American people know fairness when they see it, and they know that this process is ridiculous, and they know it's unfair. At a last minute, to have a charge like this leveled against a man that's served, been confirmed 4 times by the Senate, I think it's outrageous. But the American people are fair. They appear to be supporting Judge Thomas. I certainly am supporting him, and I see no reason to waver 1 iota. And he said, yes, I'm going to stay in there. They're not going to drive me out of this. I think that said something to the American people, too.
President Bush says he believes Thomas's story, but carefully stayed away from calling Professor Hill a liar. White House officials, though, are saying that in no uncertain terms. They tell CNN their theory is that perhaps Anita Hill was delusional 10 years ago when she made up these stories about Thomas. They also say they have reason to believe Professor Hill was embittered toward Thomas when she allegedly concocted the story. When the American people are asked who's more believable, the edge goes to Clarence Thomas. A Washington Post ABC News poll found nearly twice as many people accepting his testimony over Anita Hill's. 1 in 9 found them equally believable. But the number of people who think he should be confirmed has dropped from 63% a month ago to 50% now. Some are taking a wait-and-see attitude. Then when people were asked if they thought Anita Hill's charge of sexual harassment is true, about a third said yes, more than half said no. In the days since Hill's charges were aired, the Senate itself has come under growing criticism. By a 2-to-1 margin, people now disapprove of how it's handling the nomination. And finally, is Clarence Thomas qualified to be a Supreme Court justice? More than 3 months after his nomination, a majority says yes, but a third of the people surveyed have no opinion. Looking further afield now, after a stopover in Cyprus, a United Nations hostage negotiator is continuing his travels to the Middle East to press on for the release of Westerners held in Lebanon. After talks in Syria, John Domenico Pico will also visit Beirut. Pico negotiated the release of the last 3 Western hostages freed. Meantime, an influential Iranian newspaper today said a Westerner, possibly an American, would be released soon. The paper accurately predicted 2 previous hostage releases, but inaccurately predicted a third. U.S. Secretary of State James Baker is also in the region, forging ahead this week in a bid to clear obstacles still blocking a Middle East peace conference. Baker arrived today in Cairo for talks with Egypt's president. He also is set to travel to Jordan, Syria, and Israel, where he plans to meet Soviet Foreign Minister Boris Franken on Friday. Baker hopes Franken will announce the restoration of full diplomatic ties between Moscow and Jerusalem. And their scheduled meeting may indicate a readiness to announce a date for the peace talks. In Yugoslavia, a convoy carrying emergency food and medical supplies finally reached the besieged Croatian town of Vukovar today. The Mercy convoy of ambulances, trucks, and buses braved gunfire and fighting to complete the 9-mile trip. Heavy fighting forced retreats yesterday and Friday. Vukovar has become a symbol of the breakaway republic's resistance. Serbian guerrillas, backed by federal troops, have been fighting Croatia's 16-week-old independence declaration. More attacks by neo-Nazi skinheads against refugees inside Germany. The skinheads burned down a hostel for asylum seekers in a Bavarian town where 2 people were hurt. Several other hostel residents suffered minor injuries. Neo-Nazi attacks in Germany have been increasing in recent weeks, particularly against Eastern Europeans. Chancellor Helmut Kohl has condemned the attacks, but worries that some refugees are taking unfair advantage of Germany's asylum laws. New York police say a man with a shotgun opened fire in a house in Queens today, killing 4 people and critically wounding 2 others. Police say the suspect's father was among the victims. After the shooting, the man fled to a second house in nearby Great Neck, Long Island, where he took a man and woman hostage. He has reportedly released the man. Hostage negotiators are on the scene and have made contact with the gunman by phone. A Milwaukee judge says, break the rules to allow Jeffrey Dahmer, charged with killing 16 people, to smoke in prison. Psychiatrists and investigators say Dahmer seems more willing to discuss the murders when he is allowed to smoke. The Milwaukee County Sheriff objected to the order, saying it provided special privileges to Dahmer, but promised to comply. Dahmer has been charged, you'll remember, with 16 murders and has confessed to killing and dismembering 17 people. I'm Jonathan Mann at the CNN Center in Atlanta. We'll be back with more after this.
Every business morning, while the rest of the world is getting up, UPS is guaranteeing overnight delivery before 10:30 for far less than other companies charge. And every business morning, more people are waking up to that fact.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Polyshades by Minwax. It's a stroke of genius. Polyshades is rich stain and polyurethane protection in one. Polyshades gives wood a beautiful protective finish in half the time. Polyshades by Minwax.
The strength to perform again and again. That's what's earned Northwestern Mutual Life a record of unsurpassed financial security year after year. And aren't strength and security what you're looking for? Northwestern Mutual Life.
It took 70 years to build an empire and just 3 days to bring it down. Hear incredible stories of change in the new USSR on a CNN Sunday night special tonight, 9 Eastern.
We will be returning to the hearings for Judge Thomas. Another panel is due to come on. We haven't heard exactly when. They took a 5-minute break more than a half an hour ago. We're watching it closely for you, of course, as Jonathan Mann is watching this and the rest of the world making news as we go to him.
Yes, we've been watching it closely. We've been watching the news. Right now, we're going to take a look at the weather, though. Here's Ted Texter.
Just to keep you updated, in Washington, it's 60 degrees with scattered clouds there. Beautiful weather all across the country. There is some windy condition, though, across the plains now. A little bit of rain on in the upper Midwest. It looks like it'll continue there for the next 12 hours or so. Across most of the southern tier, mostly fair, a little on the cool side in spots, as in Washington. Remember now, we're getting well into fall, so that cool, crisp air is indeed welcome. There's a front, you can see it pushing the clouds across the plains into the middle section of the nation, producing just a little bit of rain, not too terribly much. Even some cool weather and a little bit of light rain and some snow in the northeastern U.S. In the eastern sections of the Great Lakes region as well, there's been just a little bit of light rain and some snow shower activity mixed in, but on the very, very light side, and it should stay that way. If we bring in CNN color radar, the summer, you can see the rain showers now through the Dakotas, all of this pressing to the east. It looks like Minnesota, Wisconsin, into the Great Lakes. That's where the light to moderate rain shower activity will be throughout the rest of the afternoon. Just off the tip of Florida down into Cuba, a little bit of light rain shower activity. Sometimes it's been stormy there. Take a look at what should happen through the afternoon tomorrow. The forecast map shows the frontal system pressing to the east, not moving real fast, but producing some pretty strong winds just ahead of it and behind it too. Some light rain showers back further westward. Upper Midwest, it looks like light snow shower activity will be the case. Across the rest of the nation, the balance of it, some sunshine in the east, back further to the west as well. The temperature contours through the afternoon tomorrow will be a little bit milder in the south, as you might expect, and somewhat cooler in the north and east. Great Lakes region will see the coolest weather by far. In support of some of that snow in the upper Midwest, It looks like temperatures will only rise into the 30s there. Great Lakes overall in the cool stuff, but further on down to the south and back out further westward. Temperature readings a little unusual for this time of year, still fairly mild. Even a few century mark readings in the extreme southwestern United States, back out in the desert southwest where it's been very hot. It will continue to be so. But the good news, I guess, is that in Florida there will be plenty of sunshine. Temperatures very comfortable, very seasonable for this time of year, and a lack of rainfall. There has been torrential rain over the past week there. It should subside just a little bit now with lots of sunshine. Now these forecasts for cities around the nation. CNN Weekend continues with Jonathan Mann.
Thanks, Ted. Monday is Columbus Day, and there are two pictures of the holiday as Christopher Columbus's historic journey is honored and protested. In Spain, 3 ships, replicas of the famous Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, started a voyage across the Atlantic. The reenactment kicks off Spain's year-long celebration of the 500th anniversary of Columbus's trip. But in the U.S., Indians blocked a Denver street to protest a Columbus Day parade. Many Indians say Columbus's voyage to the New World brought European diseases into North America and marked the beginning of Western colonialism and slavery. We are, of course, standing by to return to the Thomas hearings in Washington when they resume, but in the meantime, we'll take this break. Stay with us.
Stay tuned for an important offer from American Heritage Magazine.
It began with all the trappings of a Sunday afternoon sporting event. Flags, music, and hundreds of spectators packing picnic lunches eager to cheer their boys on to victory. But when the smoke cleared from a murky creek called Bull Run, 1,200 Americans lay dead or dying, the first casualties of America's bloodiest war. 130 years after it began, the Civil War has lost none of its power to move us. Until the Civil War, we were Virginians or New Yorkers. Forever after it, we were Americans. I'm Jim McPherson, and I'd like to send you this compelling history, the Civil War Chronicles, as a free gift for trying American Heritage Magazine. American Heritage is the journal of the American experience, our country's history, as you may never have experienced it before. American Heritage is history with all the impact of this morning's paper. American Heritage is first-hand history, published for the first time. American Heritage is personal history of the little-known or underrated men or women who made a difference, and of the famous, who may have made less of a difference than commonly believed. American Heritage is art, antiques, architecture, travel. What should we tell our children about Vietnam? American Heritage had 52 answers, from Tom Hayden and Pete Seeger to William Westmoreland and George Bush. Colorful, provocative, surprising, there isn't another magazine like American Heritage. And right now, I invite you to try it for yourself, without obligation.
Call this toll-free number now and receive 10 issues of American Heritage for 3 monthly installments of just $9.97, a 33% savings off the cover price. If you're not satisfied with your first issue, simply write cancel on your bill and owe nothing. Or keep American Heritage coming and receive the Civil War Chronicles free.
American Heritage is as diverse as the American experience, and like the American experience, unique in all the world.
Call this toll-free number to sample American Heritage without obligation, and the Civil War Chronicles is yours free. Call now.
The big news in Washington now that has stunned the Thomas hearings so far is that Professor Anita Hill has independently taken a lie detector test on key points of her testimony and has passed it. She was administered the test at the guidance of her attorneys, one of whom spoke, Charles Ogletree, at a news conference not long ago, and also present there was the man who administered the test for at least an hour and a half, Paul Miner, who comes with a long pedigree of expertness in the field of polygraph testing, having been in the FBI and having trained many of those who are administering polygraph tests for the FBI today. It was a stunning development. It has turned what Chairman Biden said was a 5-minute recess into one that's going nearly an hour now, as we're sitting here with Bill Schneider on tenterhooks and on hold at this startling new development, which colors the proceeding, obviously, because it's slowed it down.
That's right. Even though it has not yet been introduced at the proceedings or at the hearings, and I don't believe it will be, it's important to state exactly what a polygraph test result is. The polygraph test result that she passed does not prove that she's telling the truth. It is consistent with her assertion that she's telling the truth. Now, it's important because Jonathan Mann told us a few minutes ago that there are those in the administration, not the president, but others, who are outrightly saying that she's a liar and they're going to prove that. Now that she's passed the polygraph test, that strategy looks a little bit risky. They have to go through a more elaborate strategy of saying she passed the test even though she's a liar because she is some sort of a pathological liar who's managed to convince herself she's telling the truth. You know, a lot of this is public relations. The polygraph test clearly was timed to get on the evening news shows. When Clarence Thomas testified on Friday, a lot of people saw that he had the advantage because he had the primetime audience Friday evening, whereas she testified during the day. And his supporters were resentful that they didn't get into the hearing today in time to get on the evening news lead. A lot of this is timed for public relations purposes.
And speaking of that, the panel which is due on next is the panel which is supposed to be corroborative of the Thomas testimony. 4 people who are in his corner. They're now being delayed from going on. Do they have a right to be angry about that?
I think some of them may well be angry. I imagine they're reconsidering, the Thomas supporters are reconsidering their strategy now that the polygraph test has been taken and widely publicized. One question is exactly what they're going to do. As Thomas has said, you can't prove a negative. They can't prove he didn't do it. They just have to talk about his character and behavior. And in more important terms, I think they're going to question Anita Hill's credibility. They're going to talk about her relationship with Clarence Thomas. Was there evidence that she might have been embittered, that she might be seeking revenge? Was there any friction in their relationship? I think they're going to address themselves to that in order to impugn her credibility as much as to establish his.
One of the points that came up in conversation with our colleague at the White House, Mary Tillotson, was going to the point of why didn't she back then take some action? Why did she continue her mentor relationship with Clarence Thomas? Was it just fear of losing the leg up on a career, being with the man who was foremost in her field and not being willing to cross him? Mary points out that as a point of law, the hostile environment portion of the law on this kind of harassment discrimination wasn't in place until 1987. So the atmosphere in 1981 wasn't conducive to someone in her circumstance. What do you think of that?
Well, we know that the law concerning sexual harassment has evolved very rapidly over the past decade. It's a wholly different universe involving these laws than it was in 1981. Mary mentioned the hostile work environment. That wasn't didn't provide the basis for a legal claim of damage from sexual harassment back in 1981 when she alleges the act took place. I remember Professor Hill was asked if she was an expert in sexual harassment, and she said, well, she did do some work in that area and perhaps teach in that area back in 1986, but she's not turned in the field. Well, many of the laws have only been passed in the last year or two, so it would help her to argue that, or her supporters to argue that if she had reported it in 1981, it would have been harder to substantiate her claim against Clarence Thomas.
Bill Schneider, I'm David French in Washington. We'll be taking this break.
I'd rather take the bus and talk to my friend.
With my busy schedule, the only chance I get to read the paper is on the Metro.
Now it's just a habit I enjoy.
When you figure gas prices, parking, and maintenance on your car, it all adds up.
Drops me off right in front of my office.
I can't drive yet, but I'd love to shop. Ask my parents to drive. I had better luck winning the lotto.
Come on, hop on the bus with us.
We've got a nifty way to leave your auto.
This is no ordinary seedling. It's part of a $1.3 million tree planting program from Iowa Power. The program will help beautify Iowa and conserve heating and cooling energy. This is no ordinary piece of trash. It's recyclable trash. And last year, Iowa Power recycled tons of paper-related waste. When it comes to taking care of the world we live in, many of the most ordinary things we can do today won't seem so ordinary tomorrow.
Strained peas. My ankle's swell. Really? You feel ready, and then panic attack. Lamar's breathing. Has my lifestyle changed? I called my dad. I said, this is incredible. You have no idea how this feels.
What's new in 92? The most exciting event in the history of your local Ford dealer, and it's going on now. More new vehicles than ever before. Ford F-150 completely redesigned. A sleeker exterior, a more comfortable interior. Ford Ranger, all new colors, the best-selling compact pickup in America. What's new in 92? Cash back and low financing. All new bumper-to-bumper warranty. Don't miss your chance to save on the full line of Ford cars and trucks. See what's new in 92 at your local Ford dealer today.
This is CNN.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Mann at the CNN Center in Atlanta. We are, of course, waiting for the resumption of the Thomas hearings in Washington, D.C., but in the meantime, we're going to resume our regularly scheduled program, Baseball 91 with Hannah Strom. We will, of course, break in when those hearings resume. Right now, play ball.
Baseball 91 with your host, Hannah Strom, and analyst Howell Bodley.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's edition of Baseball 91. We're coming to you live from Atlanta's Fulton County Stadium, where the Atlanta Braves last night, by a score of 10-3, won their first playoff game in their home city in 26 years, their first win at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. Our analyst Hal Bodley is in Toronto covering the American League playoffs. He'll join us a little bit later on and talk with the starting pitchers for Game 4. We'll also talk with some of the players involved, as well as Pirates manager Jim Leyland. But first, let's take a look back at last night, where the Braves, who had trouble scoring at Three Rivers, exploded in their home park. 7 of their 11 hits last night were for extra bases. After the first pitch of the game, it was clear that both teams would take off at the launching pad.
That had never happened to me before. And the guy had come off the bench. I knew the power he had, but I didn't really anticipate the first pitch. And I just told myself, don't let this be a big inning.
Instead, it was a big inning for the Braves. With 2 outs, Atlanta belted 2 RBI doubles and a 2-run home run, chasing 20-game winner John Smiley after just 2 innings.
It felt great. I got the first 2 guys out, and everything worked real well, and they slammed the door on me from there on out.
Yeah, that was big, that first inning, to get all those hits with 2 outs. I mean, that was big for us, but I mean, I've seen us do it all year long.
While the Braves got the clutch hitting, the Pirates did not. The middle of their order was a combined 2 for 13. And shortstop Jay Bell, after going 3 for 4, struck out with the bases loaded in the 8th as the Pirates stranded 11.
It's very frustrating to strike out in a situation like that. I mean, it would have been great to hit a triple there, but really all I want to do is try and make contact there. And basically what he did was he pounded me in, and then all of a sudden he struck me out away.
It's a great feeling, you know, when you come with bases loaded and you end the inning with a strikeout, you know, and nobody scored, you know, it's a great feeling for me, and I think great feeling for the team, too.
After Atlanta hit just 197 in 2 games at Pittsburgh, the Braves' bats finally made some noise to match the noise in their stadium, where they are 7-0 against the Pirates this season.
We didn't hit the ball real well in Pittsburgh, and we knew that if we could come back to Atlanta with our crowd, get us a little enthused, we'd have a good chance to hit the ball.
You know, if there's a player out there that thinks we can't win a game at Fulton County Stadium, then they should have come in and told me they didn't want to be on the roster. You know, and if I thought we couldn't have won a game, what the hell are we doing here?
The biggest news of the day here at Fulton County Stadium comes regarding Game 1 starter and winner Doug Drabek, last year's Cy Young Award winner. There's been speculation as to whether or not he will be able to start Game 5 of the playoffs tomorrow at Fulton County Stadium. Earlier, I talked with the team trainer who gave us the answer.
Doug has a strained left hamstring that he injured the first night of the playoffs. So he's now on his 4th day after the injury, and we have made a determination already. He will not pitch tomorrow. As far as pitching goes, he's probably ready just from a pitching standpoint, but there's also a lot of running involved, and he's not quite ready, and we don't want to do anything that might hurt Doug Drabek.
All right, joining us now is Pirates manager Jim Leyland. Jim, when did you come to this decision regarding Doug, and when do you expect him to be able to pitch?
Well, really, the final decision was made today. We had him checked out real early. We were out here early with him, the trainers and myself, and I arrived at the ballpark, and we talked with Doug, the trainers, and just feel he will not quite be ready yet tomorrow, and certainly hopefully we hope that the series goes back to Pittsburgh, and it looks like with the extra days off there, he would be ready to pitch on Wednesday. So that's really the way it stands right now.
So this gives him an extra 48 hours. Are you more concerned he has the hamstring, not with his pitching, but his being able to cover first and things like that?
Well, you know, there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration, and certainly those are some of them. So you just have to watch, but we just don't feel that he's ready yet, and we don't want to take any chances, and it's just not, wouldn't do the team a service, and most of all, it wouldn't do Doug Drabeck a service. So we're going to wait and make sure he's ready.
Now, Zane Smith, a former Atlanta Brave, had his best outing of the season by far against the Braves in Game 2, lost 1-0 in the pitcher's duel. Has he pitched on 3 days rest yet this season? Do you anticipate it being a problem?
Well, he just pitched there just a couple times lately, but didn't go that many innings. But actually, if the truth be known, Zane prefers 3 days rest and would like to pitch on the 4th day all the time. Of course, we don't do that. And the other thing here is that the reason it's Zane going this way is because actually it would be 5 days rest with the day off if he didn't pitch. So he'd much rather go on 3 than 5, and it's really a case of that rather than the 4, because that doesn't come into play here. So, you know, he will pitch on 3 days rest, and he should be fine.
All right, thanks a lot for joining us, Jim. Appreciate your taking the time out. Before this game, of course, the pitching matchup is set here. Tonight it's 2 lefties, Randy Tomlin and Charlie Leabrand. We'll be back for more on Baseball 91 right after this.
Sports Week in Review, brought to you by Federal Express. Absolutely, positively the best in the business. Twice a day.
What's up? The talking elephants our sales force left with yesterday?
Yeah, there's been a little problem. Do we have any that speak elephant? Mm-hmm. So who's going to get them to all of our salesmen?
One company offers 1030 delivery to more places than anyone and treats them all with mammoth importance.
Presenting Hugo, the talking elephant.
Federal Express, our most important package, is yours.
Send a hug from far away, brighten up a rainy day. Flowers say what words can't say. It's as easy as FTD.
Whatever you need to say, your FTD florist can send the right bouquet. And remember,
It's as easy as FTD.
How do you improve a design like Ford Taurus? With no negatives, you simply accentuate the positives. Aerodynamic design becomes slipperier. Instrumentation and controls become handier. An inviting interior becomes friendlier. And in the end, the most award-winning car in its class becomes even classier. The new Ford Taurus. Have you ever wished the good things in life could get even better? Have you driven a Ford lately?
Senator Joseph Biden of Delaware, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, has just gavelled the proceeding back in to explain that we will go on with the hearing because they want a 24-hour space between hearing the last testimony and voting on Tuesday night at 6 p.m. He's explaining now about the panels that will be heard this evening.
Doggett III, or Charles Cote, is it Cote? Koth, the Dean of Oral Roberts. That's the maximum number of people who will appear on the panel. None of them have to appear, but that's the maximum that can appear. And then there will be an additional panel of 9 individuals, all of whom will work for Clarence Thomas, all women who wish to come and testify to how he related to them. Patricia Johnson, Pamela Talkin, T-A-L-K-I-N, Janet Brown, Ricky Silberman, Connie Newman, Linda Jackson, Nancy Altman, Ann Jenkins, Lori Saxon. They will each have 3 minutes to make whatever statement they wish to make on behalf of the nominee. There will be 32 minutes remaining in the time they will be allowed to be in the stand. 16 minutes will be divided on each side for cross-examination if there is any cross-examination. Then we will bring forward, if it is a decision of the witness to want to come forward, and that is not fully decided yet, Miss Angela Wright. We are talking with Miss Wright now, the committee as a whole, majority and minority. Miss Angela Wright. After Miss Angela Wright, there will be, if it is decided by any member of the committee, to call this individual, what's her name? A Miss Rose Jordan, who allegedly, I emphasize allegedly, can corroborate the testimony of Angela Wright. Staffs have taken their deposition. It'll be reviewed by members of the committee, majority and minority. If the deposition taken by the majority and minority is sufficient, that will suffice. If not, any member can call that individual forward for cross-examination. We will then end tonight. If that takes till 9, 11, 12, or 4 in the morning, that will be done. Tomorrow, we will reconvene at 10 o'clock. Professor Anita Hill will have the right, if she so chooses, to come back at 10 a.m. She will be able to testify and or be cross-examined up until 2 p.m. Whether or not her statement is finished, whether or not the cross-examination is finished, we will politely excuse her. She cannot remain beyond 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, the nominee, if he so chooses, will come forward. He will be able to say whatever he wishes and or be cross-examined or examined on direct up until 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock p.m. tomorrow, this committee shuts down. Period. There is no requirement. As a matter of fact, we're explicitly asked by the Senate as a whole not to vote on this matter. It will be left to the Senate. This committee has already voted on Clarence Thomas. The transcripts of this committee proceeding will be made available almost immediately to every member of the United States Senate. They will have 24 hours to make any judgment they wish to make and determine whether or not what has transpired here the previous 4 days influences their vote one way or another. Any senator can go to the Senate floor after 6 p.m. if the Senate is in, and I don't know whether it's in or not, but if the Senate is in, up until 6 p.m. on Tuesday, for as long as the Senate is in up to that point, and say anything they want about anything having to do with this matter. Whether they wish to go in and say, Cock Robin told them the following happened, or a little bird dropped in from the blue and gave me this affidavit. But that is not the business of the committee. So, I want to turn to my distinguished colleague from South Carolina and ask him whether or not what I related is in fact what the overwhelming majority of the committee voted to do.
Mr. Chairman, I think you've stated correctly. The only thing, if you wish to bring this right here, you have that right. And we have a chance to cross-examine her.
That is absolutely correct.
But we object to any statement by her affidavit being put in the record
that
without
is absolutely correct. No affidavits at all will be placed in this record from now until the time the committee completes its responsibility. Is there anyone in the committee that has heard what I've said that disagrees with what I laid out as being the majority will of the committee?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I believe there was one further addendum, and that there would be no closing statements by any member.
That is correct. There will be no closing statements by any member of the committee. The senator from Pennsylvania.
I would just like the record to note my dissent.
The record will note the dissent of the distinguished senator from Pennsylvania as to the manner in which we have otherwise, I believe, unanimously... Yes.
My dissent noted.
Dissent as to all of it, or... Well, never, but doesn't matter. The senator, I don't mean that flippantly. I mean, it's not worth going back into.
Sure. No, covered.
The committee voted 12-2 to proceed as I have outlined, with the dissents noted. Obviously, everyone else who did not dissent, other than Senator Specter and Senator Brown, voted affirmatively to proceed as I have stated. Now, Thank you all for your patience. That is the unanimous consent agreement that has just been agreed to. Ladies and gentlemen, let us proceed. I thank this panel for their absolute patience here. You've been very gracious. And there will be no dinner break, I say to our friends in the press. There will be no break other than occasionally requiring if the witnesses are here longer than the constitutions would warrant, we will break for that purpose. And I say to the panel, do you have any preferred order of proceeding? Well, why don't we begin by first swearing you all in. Do you all swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth and the whole truth? So help you God.
I do.
I was just, as usual, properly corrected by my colleague. I should have said, instead of the truth and the whole truth, the truth and nothing but the truth. But we understand what we all just swore to. You all just swore to. Now, why don't we begin then, if you have no preferred order, with Ms. Alvarez and work our way across, or either way. Do you have a preference?
I'll start.
There being none, we'll start with Ms. Alvarez, and welcome back. I know you were here, it seems like 100 years ago, but not too long ago. I've been instructed by my colleague from South Carolina to ask you if you can keep your statements to 3 minutes, because there are going to be a lot of questions of you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that was your, I think that was agreed that there would be a 3 minutes.
I think that's correct.
Oh, that's on panel.
All right, no, well, keep 5 minutes. Keep.
Yeah, that's the last panel. Excuse me, I was in error on that.
Keep your statement to 5 minutes, if you would, and then we'll begin the questions. Thank you very, very much.
Please. My name is J.C. Alvarez. I'm a businesswoman from Chicago. I'm a single mom, raising a 15-year-old son, running a business. In many ways, I'm just a John Q. Public from Middle America, not unlike a lot of the people watching out there, and not unlike a lot of your constituents. But the political world is not a world that I'm unfamiliar with. I spent 9 years in Washington, D.C. A year with Senator Danforth, 2 years with the Secretary of Education, a short stint at the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and 4 years as Special Assistant to Clarence Thomas at the EEOC. Because of this past political experience, I was just before this committee a couple of weeks ago, speaking in support of Clarence Thomas's nomination to the Supreme Court. I was then, and I still am, in favor of Clarence Thomas being on the Supreme Court. When I was asked to testify the last time, I flew to Washington, D.C., very proud and happy to be part of the process of nominating a Supreme Court justice. When I was sitting here before you last time, I remembered why I had liked working in Washington, D.C. so much. The intellectual part of it, the high quality of the debate. Although I have to admit, when I had to listen to some of your questioning and postulating and politicking, I remembered why I had left. And I thought at that point that certainly I had seen it all. After the hearings, I flew back to Chicago, back to being John Q. Public, having a life very far removed from this political world. And it would have been easy to continue to stay away from politics in Washington, D.C. Like most of your constituents out there, I have more than my share of day-to-day challenges that have nothing to do with Washington, D.C. and politics. As I said before, I am a single mom, raising a teenager in today's society, running a business, making ends meet, soccer games, homework, doing laundry, paying bills. That's my day-to-day reality. Since I left Washington, D.C., I vote once every 4 years for president and more frequently for other state and local officials. And I could have remained outside of the political world for a long, long time and not missed it. I don't need this. I needed to come here like I needed a hole in the head. It cost me almost $900 just for the plane ticket to come here. And then there's the hotel and other expenses. And I can assure you
that especially in these recessionary times, I've got lots of other uses for that money. So why did I come? Why didn't I just stay uninvolved and apolitical? Because, Senators, like most real Americans who witness a crime being committed, who witness an injustice being done, I could not look the other way and pretend that I did not see it. I had to get involved. In my real life, I have walked down the street and seen a man beating up a woman, and I've stepped in and tried to stop it. I've walked through a park and seen a group of teenage hoodlums taunting an old drunk man, and I've jumped in the middle of it. I don't consider myself a hero. No, I'm just a real American from middle America who will not stand by and watch a crime being committed and walk away. To do so would be the beginning of the deterioration of society and of this great country. No, Senators, I cannot stand by and watch a group of thugs beat up and rob a man of his money any more than I could have stayed in Chicago and stood by and watched you beat up an innocent man and rob him blind. Not of his money. That would have been too easy. You could pay that back. No, you have robbed a man of his name, his character, and his reputation. And what's amazing to me is that you didn't do it in a dark alley, and you didn't do it in the dark of night. You did it in broad daylight, in front of all America, on television, for the whole world to see. Yes, Senators, I am witnessing a crime in progress, and I cannot just look the other way, because I am John Q. Public, and I am getting involved. I know Clarence Thomas, and I know Anita Hill. I was there from the first few weeks of Clarence coming to the commission. I had the office next to Anita's. We all worked together in setting and executing the goals and the direction that the chairman had for the EEOC. I remember Chris Rogerson, Carlton Stewart, Nancy Fitch, Barbara Parris, Phyllis Berry, Bill Ing, Allison Duncan, Diane Holt. Each of us with our own area of expertise and responsibility, but together, all of us a part of Clarence Thomas's hand-picked staff. I don't know how else to say it, but I have to tell you that it just blew my mind to see Anita Hill testifying on Friday. Honest to goodness, it was like schizophrenia. That was not the Anita Hill that I knew and worked with at EEOC. On Friday, she played the role of a meek, innocent, shy Baptist girl from the South who was a victim of this big, bad man. I don't know who she was trying to kid, because the Anita Hill that I knew and worked with was nothing like that. She was a very hard, tough woman. She was opinionated, she was arrogant, she was a relentless debater, and she was the kind of woman who always made you feel like she was not going to be messed with, like she was not going to take anything from anyone. She was aloof. She always acted as if she was a little bit superior to everyone, a little holier than thou. I can recall at the time that she had a view of herself and her abilities that did not seem to be based in reality. For example, it was sort of common knowledge around the office that she thought she should have been Clarence's chief legal advisor, and that she should have received better assignments. And I distinctly remember when I would hear about her feeling that way, or when I would see her pout in office meetings about assignments that she had gotten, I used to think to myself, come on, Anita, let's come down to earth and live in reality. She had only been out of law school a couple of years, and her experience and her ability couldn't begin to compare with some of the others on the staff. But I also have to say that I was not totally surprised at her wanting these assignments, because she definitely came across as someone who was ambitious and watched out for her own advancement. She wasn't really a team player, but more someone who looked out for herself first. You could see the same thing in her relationships with others at the office.
Ms. Alvarez, we had a 5-minute, for the other panel, but we had very extensive questionings. I don't want to cut you off, and you
Well,
waited
Senator,
a long time.
if you just give me a few more minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a statement.
Okay.
The other panel has been on all day long. This is a panel in reverse now. And the only limitation was the number 9 for 1 hour. And that's the last panel. Come on. I object to cutting these people off. They're entitled to speak.
It's about 10 minutes ago, and it's already being broken. Let's stick to
There's no agreement on this panel at all.
It's my understanding.
It was the last panel of 9 people that we agreed to take 1 hour on and no more. This panel is answering the first panel that's been on here for hours and hours. And they're entitled to speak, and we're going to contend for it.
Well, I think the record will show that there were as many questions focused on the other panel from that side as there was from this side. I distinctly heard the chairman say that there were going to be 5 minutes, and then it's unlimited.
Well, he suggested 5 minutes.
All right, let's make it 7.
This panel is not.
Let's make it 7. Do you want to take
No, we don't want to limit them. You didn't limit this morning. You didn't limit all day long. They were in your favor. Here's some in our favor. They're entitled to speak.
We'll be. I'll ask the clerk to read back what Chairman Biden said about this panel.
Well, Chairman Biden.
I'll ask the clerk to read back what was agreed to. I came in at the very end.
No agreement. He just said.
That's not true.
Suggested 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Ms. Alvarez. Continue.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I...
Ms. Alvarez is going to continue.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I think we all concurred on the one panel with 3 minutes, and that's separate and apart from this. And this is the regular panel and the regular time that we did this morning with the other group, and now we just asked for the same courtesies here.
That's exactly, the senator stated, whatever time was given to the earlier panel ought to be given to this panel. I'm glad the chair is back.
Good to see you, Joe.
Please go on. Do we? Oh, I'm not sure. But I know I don't know the dilemma, and I don't want it repeated. Did you all settle it? Did we all square? Okay, wonderful. All right. What is the motion, Mr. Chairman?
No. There's no motion at all. Just let them speak till they get through.
Speak.
Please. I made an awful lot of effort to come here. I'd like to just finish saying what I have to say.
You go right ahead.
You could see that Anita Hill was not a real team player, but more someone who looked out for herself. You could see this even in her relationships with others at the office. She mostly kept to herself, although she would occasionally participate in some of the girl talk among the women at the office. And I have to add that I don't recall her being particularly shy or innocent about that either. You see, Senators, that was the Anita Hill that we all knew and we worked with. And that's why hearing her on Friday was so shocking. No, not shocking, it was so sickening. Trust me, the Anita Hill I knew and worked with was a totally different personality from the Anita Hill I heard on Friday. The Anita Hill I knew before was nobody's victim. The Clarence Thomas I knew and worked with also was not who Miss Hill alleges. Everyone who knows Clarence knows that he is a very proud and dignified man. With his immediate staff, he's very warm and friendly, sort of like a friend or a father. You could talk with him about your problems, go to him for advice. But like a father, he commanded and he demanded respect. He demanded professionalism and performance, and he was very strict about that. Because we were friends outside of the office, or perhaps in private, I might have called him Clarence. But in the office, he was Mr. Chairman. You didn't joke around with him. You didn't lose your respect for him. You didn't become too familiar with him, because he would definitely let you know that you had crossed the line. Clarence was meticulous about being sure that he retained a very serious and professional atmosphere within his office without the slightest hint of impropriety, and everyone knew it. We weren't a coffee-clatching group. We didn't have office parties or Christmas parties because Clarence didn't think that it was appropriate for us to give others the impression that we were not serious or professional, or perhaps working as hard as everyone else. He wanted to maintain a dignity about his office, and his every behavior and action confirmed that. As his professional colleague, I traveled with him, had lunch and dinner with him, worked with him, one-on-one, and with others. Never did he ever lose his respect for me. Never did we ever have a type of discussion of the type that Ms. Hill alleges. Never was he the slightest bit improper with me. In every situation I have shared with Clarence Thomas, he has been the ultimate professional, and he has required it of those around him, in particular, his personal staff. From the moment they surfaced, I have thought long and hard about these allegations. You see, I too have experienced sexual harassment in the past. I've been physically accosted by a man in an elevator who I rebuffed. I was trapped in a Xerox room by a man who I refused to date. Obviously, it is an issue I have experienced, I understand, and I take very seriously. But having lived through it myself, I find Anita Hill's behavior inconsistent with these charges. I can assure you that when I come into town, the last thing I want to do is call either of these two men up and say hello or see if they want to get together. To be honest with you, I can hardly remember their names, but I can assure you that I would never try and even maintain a cordial relationship with either one of them. Women who have really been harassed would agree. If her allegations were true, you put as much distance as you can between yourself and that other person. What's more, you don't follow them to the next job, especially if you're a black female Yale Law School graduate. Let's face it, out in the corporate sector, companies are fighting for women with those kind of credentials. Her behavior just isn't consistent with the behavior of a woman who's been harassed, and it just doesn't make sense. Senators, I don't know what else to say to have you understand the crime that's been committed here. It has to make all of us suspicious of her motives. When someone of her legal background comes in here at the 11th hour after 10 years and having had 4 other opportunities through congressional hearings to oppose this man and alleges such preposterous things. I have been contacted by, I think, every reporter in the country looking for dirt. When I present the facts as I experience them, it's interesting, they don't print it. It's just not as juicy as her amazing allegations. What is this country coming to? When an innocent man can be ambushed like this, jumped by a gang whose ringleader is one of his own proteges, Anita Hill. Like Julius Caesar, he must want to turn to her and say, "Et tu, Brutus? You too, Anita?" As a mother with a child, I can only begin to imagine how Clarence must feel, being betrayed by one of his own. Nothing would hurt me more. And I guess he described it best in his opening statements on Friday. His words and his emotions are still ringing in all of our ears and all of our hearts. I have done the best I could, Senators, to be honest in my statement to you. I have presented the situation as it was then, as I lived it, side by side, with Clarence and with Anita. You know, I talked with my mom before I came here, and she reminded me that I was always raised to stand up for what I believe. I have seen an innocent man being mugged in broad daylight, and I have not looked the other way. This John Q. public came here and got involved.
Ms. Fitch.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Senator Thurmond, members of the committee, my name is Dr. Nancy Elizabeth Fitch. I have a BA in English Literature and Political Science from Oakland University, which was part of Michigan State University at the time.
Put a loudspeaker closer to you so that people in the back can hear you.
And a master's and PhD in history from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I have taught at Sangamon State University in Illinois, been a social science research analyst for the Congressional Research Service of the Library of Congress, been a special assistant and historian to the chairman, then chairman of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Clarence Thomas, an assistant professor of history at Lynchburg College in Virginia, and presently Assistant Professor of African American Studies at Temple University in Philadelphia. From 1982 to 1989, I worked as a special assistant historian to then Chairman Clarence Thomas of the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I worked for and with him 7 years and have known him for 9. I researched the history of African Americans, people of color, and women, and their relationship to issues including employment, education, and training. These were used for background on speeches, special emphasis programming at the Commission, and for policy position papers. I reported only to Judge Thomas, and my responsibilities also included outreach efforts to local colleges and universities and to the D.C. public schools. Judge Thomas was interested in his staff and himself being mentors and role models, especially, but not only, to young people of color. In these 9 years, I have known Clarence Thomas to be a person of great integrity, morally upstanding, professional, a decent person, and exemplary boss. Those years spent in his employ as a Schedule C employee, a political appointee, were the most rewarding of my work life to that time. My returning to higher education, I attribute to his persuading me to return to what I loved, not continuing as a bureaucrat, but returning to teaching. I would like to say, Judge Thomas, besides being a person of great moral character, I found to be a most intelligent man. Senator Biden was correct yesterday when he indicated that the Republican side of the panel might have overlooked its easiest defense, that of dealing with the judge's intelligence. If these allegations, which I believe to be completely unfounded and vigorously believe unfounded, were true, we would be dealing not only with veniality, but with abject stupidity, with a person shooting himself in the foot, having given someone else the gun to use at any time. There is no way Clarence Thomas, CT, would callously, venally hurt someone. A smart man concerned about making a contribution to this country as a public official, recognizing the gravity and weightiness of his responsibilities in public trust, a role model and mentor who would by his life and work show the possibilities in America for all citizens given opportunity. Well, such a person such as this, Judge Clarence Thomas, would never, ever make a parallel career in harassment, ask that it not be revealed, and expect to have and keep his real career. And I know he did no such thing. He is a dignified, reserved, deliberative, conscientious man of great conscience, and I am proud to be at his defense. As I told the FBI agent who interviewed me on Tuesday, October 1st, I trust Judge Thomas completely. He has all of my support and caring earned by 9 years of the most positive and affirmative interacting, not only with me, but with other staff and former staff, men and women. And I know he will get back his good name. Thank you.
Very much. Ms. Holt?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Thurmond, members of this committee, my name is Diane Holt. I'm a management analyst in the Office of the Chairman at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I have known Clarence Thomas for over 10 years. For 6 of those years, I worked very closely with him, cheek to cheek, shoulder to shoulder, as his personal secretary. My acquaintance with Judge Thomas began in May of 1991 after he had been appointed as Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the Department of Education. I had been the personal secretary to the outgoing Assistant Secretary for several years. Upon Judge Thomas's arrival at the department, he held a meeting with me in which he indicated that he was not committed to bringing his own secretary and had no wish to displace me. Because he was not familiar with my qualifications, he made no guarantees, but gave me an opportunity to prove myself. That is the kind of man he is. In May of 1982, Judge Thomas asked me to go to the EEOC with him, where I worked as his secretary until September of 1987. I met Professor Hill in the summer of 1981 when she came to work at the Department of Education as attorney advisor to Judge Thomas. After about a year, Judge Thomas was nominated to be chairman of the EEOC. He asked both Professor Hill and myself to transfer with him. Both Ms. Hill and I were excited about the prospect of transferring to EEOC. We discussed the greater potential for individual growth at this larger agency. We discussed and expressed excitement that we would be at the right hand of the individual who would run this agency. When we arrived at the EEOC, because we knew no one else there, Professor Hill and I quickly developed a professional relationship, a professional friendship, often having lunch together. At no time did Professor Hill intimate, not even in the most subtle of ways, that Judge Thomas was asking her out or subjecting her to the crude, abusive conversations that have been described. Nor did I ever discern any discomfort when Professor Hill was in Judge Thomas's presence. Additionally, I never heard anyone at any time make any reference to any inappropriate conduct in relation to Clarence Thomas. The Clarence Thomas that I know has always been a motivator of staff, always encouraging others to grow professionally. I personally have benefited from that encouragement and that motivation. In sum, the Chairman Thomas that I have known for 10 years is absolutely incapable of the abuses described by Professor Hill.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miller.
And you can call me Phyllis Berry, since that was my name that I used throughout my professional life, and that's probably what most people are going to refer to me as. Mr. Chairman, Senator Thurmond, and members of the committee, I am Phyllis Berry. I know and have worked with both Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill. I've known Judge Thomas since 1979 and Anita Hill since 1982. Once Clarence Thomas was confirmed as the chairman of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and had assumed his duties there, he asked me to come and work with him at the commission. I joined his staff as a special assistant in June of 1982. At the commission, Chairman Thomas asked that I assume responsibility for 3 areas. I was to, 1, assist in assessing, reorganizing his personal staff, scheduling, speech writing, those kinds of things. 2, to assist in professionalizing the Office of Congressional Affairs, as that office was called then. 3, assist in reorganizing the Office of Public Affairs, as that office was called then. Anita Hill was already a member of Clarence Thomas's staff when I joined the commission. There are several points to be made. 1, many of the areas of responsibility that I had been asked to oversee were areas that Anita Hill handled, particularly congressional affairs and public relations. We, therefore, had to work together. Chris Rogerson was the director of congressional affairs at that time, and Anita Hill worked more under his supervision than Clarence Thomas's. 2, Clarence Thomas's behavior toward Anita Hill was no more, no less than his behavior toward the rest of his staff. He was respectful, demanding of excellence in our work, cordial, professional, interested in our lives and our career ambitions. 3, Anita Hill indicated to me that she had been a primary advisor to Clarence Thomas at the Department of Education. However, she seemed to be having a difficult time on his EEOC staff of being considered just one of many, especially on a staff where others were as equally or more talented than she. 4, Anita Hill often acted as though she had a right to immediate, direct access to the chairman. Such access was not always immediately available. I felt she was particularly distressed when Allison Duncan became chief of staff and her direct access to the chairman was even more limited. 5, I cannot remember anyone, except perhaps Diane Holt, who was regarded as personally close to Anita. She was considered by most of us as somewhat aloof. In addition, I would like to make these comments. In a press conference on October 7, 1991, Anita Hill indicated that she did not know me, and I did not know her. However, in her testimony before this committee, she affirmed that not only did we know one another, but that we enjoyed a friendly, professional relationship. Also, she testified that I had the opportunity to observe and did observe her interaction with Clarence Thomas at the office. 2, I served at the Department of Education at the same time that Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas were there. One aspect of my job was to assist with the placement of personnel at the department, particularly Schedule C and other accepted service appointments, such as Schedule A appointments. Accepted service means those positions in federal civil service accepted from the normal competitive requirements that are authorized by law, executive order, or regulation. The Schedule C hiring authority is the means by which political appointees are hired. The Schedule A hiring authority is the means by which attorneys, teachers in overseas dependent school systems, drug enforcement agents in undercover work, etc. are hired. The office that I worked in was also responsible for reviewing any hiring that the department's political appointees made under the accepted service hiring authority. Therefore, in that capacity, I was aware of any accepted service hiring decisions made in the Office of Civil Rights. That's the office that Clarence Thomas headed at that time. And Anita Hill was hired in that office as a Schedule A employee. Now, federal personnel processing procedures require a lot of specific knowledge and a lot of paperwork, and I do not profess to be a federal personnel expert, but I can attest to the procedures required by our office and the Office of Personnel at the Department of Education at that time. At the end of such procedures, a new employee would have no doubt whatsoever regarding their status, their grade, their pay, their benefits, their promotion rights, employment rights, and obligations as a federal employee and as an employee in the department. A new employee would know whether their employment is classified as permanent or temporary, protected or non-protected, those kinds of things. Each new employee must sign a form that contains such information before employment can begin. The personnel department at the Department of Education is a fine one, and it takes pride in thoroughly counseling new employees. And 3, Anita Hill has asserted that she thought the Department of Education was going to be abolished, and that was one factor in her decision to accept a position with Clarence Thomas at the EEOC. Well, at that same time, there was much discussion in Congress about the abolition of EEOC as well. It was seriously suggested that Title VII enforcement functions and Age Act's responsibilities be redistributed to other agencies of the federal government and that the commission itself should be abolished. Anyone involved with the confirmation proceedings of Clarence Thomas to the EEOC chairmanship, as Anita Hill was, surely would have been aware of this. I have known Clarence Thomas in times of his darkest moments and in his shining triumphs. I've had a role in most of his confirmation battles, none of which have ever been easy. In that capacity, I have been privy to the most intimate details of his life. In all that time, never has anyone raised allegations such as Anita has. Clarence Thomas, whom I admire and greatly respect, is a fine and decent man. He does not deserve this savaging of his character, of his reputation, of his honor. He does not deserve this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Myers. The chair yields to the senator from Vermont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, what is the So we won't have any confusion.
We will work the way we did in the past. We'll have two 15-minute rounds on either side, total of 4 15-minute rounds, if it is a desire of the primary questioners to go that long, and then we'll move to 5-minute rounds.
Thank you very much. Ms. Alvarez, prior to giving it here, had you discussed your statement with anybody else before you delivered it here?
Oh, no.
Thank you. And Ms. Fitch?
I discussed with counsel procedural matters and was simply advised, the only advice that I was given was to tell the truth, and that's what I tried to do.
Did anybody ask to change any part of your statement?
No, I had my statement with me. It was simply typed.
Thank you. And Ms. Holt?
No, as Ms. Fitch indicated, I also talked to counsel on procedural matters and was simply told to tell the truth.
And nobody asked you to make any changes?
No.
Thank you. And Ms. Berry?
I talked with staff. I'm not known as a woman that anybody can tell real easily.
Well, that's not my question.
And nobody changed anything on my testimony, asked me to change anything, just asked me to tell the truth and the facts as I know them.
Ms. Berry, just for the confusion, I saw a list on panel earlier that Phyllis Myers was going to be here, and say your name, always used professionally as Phyllis Berry. You made some reference earlier to the fact that Professor Hill said she didn't know you. Wasn't that a case where she was asked about Phyllis Myers and said she didn't know Phyllis Myers, and said later she understands it was Phyllis Berry, and said yes, she does know Phyllis Berry, and that she was confused by the names?
I'm not aware of that.
Let me ask Ms. Alvarez, when you worked with Clarence Thomas, how much of a typical day did you spend with him?
Sometimes I saw him once a day, sometimes I didn't see him at all, sometimes more than once. There was really no typical day. We didn't spend a lot of time in his office or with him.
And you certainly did not see him all day long, though. That's my point.
No, I mean, I would see him come into the office. I would occasionally see him during the day, not all day.
And so there could have been times you could have had discussions with Anita Hill that you would not have been there.
Oh, absolutely.
So you don't know from personal knowledge whether Professor Hill is telling the truth or not? From personal knowledge?
No, sir.
Thank you. And Ms. Fitch, when you worked with Clarence Thomas, how much of a typical day did you spend with him?
My schedule was rather unusual because I was out in research libraries and out in the school system. So there are days, there might be weeks where I did not see him and would touch base with Ms. Holt to let her know what I was doing.
It'd be fair to say that from personal knowledge, you would not know whether Professor Hill was telling the truth or not. And Ms. Holt, you probably were as close to Judge Thomas as anybody. You were his personal secretary, is that correct?
That's correct.
Door between your office and his?
I'm sorry?
I said there was a door between your office and his?
Yes.
And there were times when people would go in, would meet with him, the door would be closed, is that correct?
That's true.
And times when Anita Hill, for example, might be in the office and it'd be just the two of them, the door would be closed, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so you would not know from personal knowledge whether Professor Hill is telling the truth or not?
No, I would not.
And Ms. Berry, how about you? Would you have from personal knowledge, knowledge of whether Professor Hill was telling the truth or not?
I would not have personal knowledge.
Thank you. Now, let me ask this of each of you. As I told Judge Thomas, and I think most people here did, I don't really have any interest in what he does in the privacy of his home, nor do I have any of the rest of you. But as you're probably aware, a supporter of his, Levita Coleman, is quoted in the New York Times saying that at Yale Law School, Judge Thomas, quote, at least once humorously described an X-rated film to me and other colleagues. Then the Times story continues and says, elaborating beyond the statement, she acknowledged that this had occurred more than once, close quote. Have you ever heard, sorry, you, Ms. Alvarez, have you ever heard Judge Thomas engage in such conversations with colleagues in the workplace?
No. Never.
Ms. Fitch?
Never, ever.
Ms. Holt?
Never.
Ms. Berry?
Absolutely not.
Have you ever heard, or do you have others tell you of Judge Thomas talking about pornographic films? Ms. Berry?
Absolutely not.
Ms. Holt?
No.
Fitch?
No.
No.
Senator.
Now, did Judge Thomas ever engage in, well, let me be more specific. I want to speak of social activities with the staff. Do you ever go out to lunch with members of the staff, Ms. Alvarez?
Yes, he went to lunch with members of the staff. That was not unusual, but not frequently, very rarely.
Well, Ms. Fitch, you said you were gone a lot, but your answer would be the same?
There were occasions when I was in the office and I would be walking through and he would look for someone to go to accompany him to lunch, so 2 or 3 of us might accompany him at that time.
And Ms. Holt, that was your experience also?
Absolutely.
And Ms. Berry?
The same.
Do you ever go out for beers or drinks or socialize after work, Ms. Alvarez?
Yeah, then again, very infrequently. It would be something like, it'd be 5:30, 6 o'clock, and we'd still be talking over something, and we'd just go grab a beer.
Ms. Fitch?
I'm not aware of that.
Ms. Holt?
Not with me, sir.
Ms. Berry?
No, the only social functions that we had at all would be in connection with my job when I became director of the Office of Congressional Affairs, and there was some reception or something like that that we had to attend.
Did you ever know of Judge Thomas dating any member of the staff, Ms. Alvarez?
No, sir.
You never dated, for example?
No, sir.
Ms. Fitch?
No, sir, and I never dated him either.
Same answer. Ms. Holt?
No, sir.
And Ms. Berry?
I never dated him, and I guess my husband would have a lot to say about that if I did.
I just didn't want to leave. I knew what your answer would be, but I didn't want him having asked the same question, the other three, leave you out and leave some inference. But did you ever know of him dating anybody else?
No, never.
Either at EEOC or at the Department of Education?
At the Department of Education, no.
And your answer of each of the rest should be the same. Now, Professor Hill...
We will return with more questions and answers at the Thomas hearing after this.
Time magazine called him the master funny man of the age. The LA Times called him one of the funniest people in the world. Now, for the first time ever, the legendary king of comedy and music is captured on video in the best of Victor Borge.
Pardon me, madam, are you laying eggs?
It's the funniest, most outrageous comedy classic ever recorded.
Isn't it a shame these big fat opera singers always lean against the pianos and bend them?
Recorded live, this collector's edition of Priceless Comedy is a must for every Victor Borge fan.
Arlen will sing the Kagame, the what? The Kaganomi aria from the opera Rigor Mortis.
It's the incomparable Victor Borge in his best loved, most heartwarming comedy performance of all time. The best of Victor Borge on VHS is only $19.95. This classic comedy collection is not available in any store at any price. To order your personal copy, you must act now.
To order the hilarious Best of Victor Borge, use your credit card and call toll-free 1-800-257-1257. That's 1-800-257-1257. Or send $19.95 plus $3.95 postage and handling to Victor Borge, P.O. Box 8250, Atlanta, Georgia. That's Victor Borge, P.O. Box 8250, Atlanta, Georgia. Or call now, 1-800-257-1257.
is CNN.
The questioning continues now here at the Senate Judiciary Committee of the corroborative panel of former employees and those who favor Judge Thomas. We'll listen in as the answers continue.
Thomas's political eyes and ears, and sharing many confidences with him is discussing him with anybody. I was not in the habit of discussing Clarence Thomas with anybody.
Did you?
And I certainly was not in the habit of saying anything to Angela Wright. Her staff and my staff could confirm that we were barely on professional speaking terms.
So you would say that the comment that she attributes to you, well, he's a man, you know, he's always hitting on everybody. You never made that comment either to her first, yes or no? You never made that comment to her. Did you ever say anything even like that to her?
That doesn't even sound like me.
Or to anybody else?
Never.
Now, Ms. Fitch, one of the things that all of us have asked in here, and I'm sure you and everybody else has gone through in their mind, is what motivates all of this. And if a woman, well, let me ask you this. You know Professor Hill very well.
I know Professor Hill. We were collegial and friendly. I never said I knew her very well, but we were friendly, yes.
She worked hard to get where she was.
I'm sorry?
Would it be a fair statement? She worked pretty hard to get where she was?
I think she did, yes.
Do you ever witness any time when she would take an action that would just jeopardize her career?
No, I never did.
And do you ever have an occasion where she lied to you?
No.
What could she possibly gain from speaking out against Judge Thomas? I mean, what could she possibly gain by making up a story and speaking out against him?
Senator, I have no idea. I'm not a psychiatrist, though I admit I wanted to be for a long time, but I have no idea. I cannot speak to her motivation. It may very well be that Professor Hill believes what she says. That's not to say that therefore she's telling a falsehood, but it doesn't mean that the situation ever happened. Those two things can happen together.
We have two such diametrically opposed stories. There's one thing that both agree on in testimony here. Professor Hill agrees that what she has described would be sexual harassment. I asked Judge Thomas exactly the same question. I said, on these set of facts, he, of course, categorically denies them, but on these set of facts, would that be sexual harassment? And he said, yes, it would. So they both agree on that. Is it possible that each of them believes he or she is telling the truth?
Of course it's possible, Senator.
I mean, you know them both.
I know them both. I believe because of his past performance, because of the way he has treated me. I have been in meetings with him in his office with the door both closed and open. When I do come back from my sojourns in libraries, we did talk about my reports. I believe him to be telling the truth. There has never been anything in his character or in his interaction with me or anyone else that I saw him interacting with that would suggest the even remotest possibility that this could be true.
And Ms. Holt, you've known Professor Hill. Would you say she worked hard to get where she was?
I say she worked hard, yes.
Did you ever see her do something that would jeopardize her career during the time you knew her?
Not to jeopardize her career, no.
Did she ever lie to you that you know of?
Not that I know of.
Well, what does she gain by doing this?
I have no idea. I think she would be the only person that could answer that question for you.
Now, you have not worked for Judge Thomas for some time. When did you stop working for him?
September of 87.
Of 87?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Now, he was nominated first part of July, 4th of July weekend, I believe it was, and after he was nominated, what was the first time that anyone showed you phone logs or any portion thereof or talked to you about phone logs?
After he was nominated?
After he was nominated. He was nominated July 1st, and there's been discussions of phone logs that you kept. When was the first time somebody came to you and said, hey, by the way, I want to talk to you about these phone logs?
It was last week.
Last week. That was the first time.
Right.
And who was that? Who first showed the phone logs to you?
I don't know who first showed them to me. I was shown the phone logs by a person from the Justice Department. And I was also shown the phone logs by the vice chairman at the EEOC.
And who is that, please?
Ricky Silberman.
Do you know where the vice chairman obtained the pages that she showed you, or how she determined they were pertinent?
I have no idea.
All right. Now, you said in your staff interview that the vice chairman asked you whether if a caller were returning Clarence Thomas' call, you would have returned your call. Now, callers didn't always indicate whether they're returning his call or not, did they?
Usually they did, sir.
But not always.
I can't think of an instance when one didn't.
Did you ever use a tear-off pad or a phone message book with individual message sheets and copies?
I never did.
When Vice Chairman Silberman brought you pages from the logs, were any particular messages asterisk? Did they have some asterisks on them?
Asterisk? No.
None?
Are you saying an asterisk?
Yeah, or a special mark?
There were messages with check marks and with X's.
Were those check marks that you'd made?
Yes.
Were there any marks on the pages that they brought back to you that you do not recall having made?
No, there's a phone call a message that I did not take.
I know my time is up, Mr. Chairman. I know that you are going to keep all questioners to tight time limits. I'll wait for the next go-around.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Chairman. What I'd suggest now is Senator Thurmond will assign somebody to question you for 15 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I've asked Senator Hatch to question this panel.
Well, thank you, Senator Thurmond. Welcome to these proceedings. I'm just going to ask a series of questions I'd like to get out of the way first. All four of you have worked very closely with Clarence Thomas, is that right? We'll start with you, Ms. Alvarez, and just go across the...
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
That's correct.
Bring your mics a little bit closer so everybody can hear you. Tell me the number of years each of you has worked closely with Chairman Thomas. Ms. Alvarez?
I worked closely with him 4 years. I've known him 13 years.
4 years and have known, yeah, that's good. Good vote.
I worked for him for 7 years and have known him in the subsequent 2 years.
Great.
9 years.
So 9 years.
I was his personal secretary for a total of 6 years, but I've known him for 10.
Okay. Ms. Berry?
I've known him since 1979, but I worked most closely with him at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and that was about 5 years.
Have any of you ever seen anything, or seen him do anything, or have heard him accused of doing anything, like what Professor Hill has articulated here before this committee? Ms. Alvarez?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, sir.
Let me start with you, Ms. Holt. You were here in what we would call a true trial, in the capacity of really a personal witness as well as a custodial witness. You can help us, it seems to me, figure out the significance and relevance of the extensive telephone log records where the messages received by Clarence Thomas. Also, since the testimony of Anita Hill on Friday, the issue of whether Professor Hill's telephone calls to Judge Thomas might in fact have been telephone calls to you has been interjected, because she indicated some of them were just calls to you. Is that so?
She did call me on occasion.
Are they the ones you've listed in this?
They are not.
Logs?
No.
They are not.
No.
And this is your handwriting on these logs, primarily?
Primarily.
With regard to these phone calls involving Anita Hill?
Right.
Each and every one of them?
Each and every call? No.
But I'm talking about the ones involving Anita Hill only.
That's what I'm saying. No, there's one call on here that...
Well, we'll go through it.
Okay.
Yes, one call. But all the others are your handwriting.
Right.
Okay, now there are 10 messages recorded by you in the telephone logbook, which I had entered into the record yesterday. Now, do these represent all of the times that Anita Hill called or might have called Judge Thomas during the 7 years that you worked for Judge Thomas?
There were other times she called and he was available to take the call, which would mean that there was no indication in the phone log.
So there were a number of other times besides the at least 10 that you wrote down mentioned in these logs.
Right.
Were they frequent or were they just sporadic?
They were sporadic.
But there were more than 1, 2, 3. Could you give us an estimate?
I would say maybe another 5 or 6.
Another 5 or 6. So at least 15 or 16 calls that you received over these years during the 7 years you worked for Judge Thomas.
Right.
Is that right? Were these always cordial calls?
They were always cordial.
Was her voice always basically the same? Was it friendly?
It was always friendly.
Okay. If she called and Judge Thomas were in and available to take the call, that would be put through on most occasions, right?
It would be put through.
That you wouldn't write down?
I'm sorry?
You would not write those calls down?
I would not write that down, no.
Okay. Now, as you've said, these 10 calls are in your handwriting. So is there any other reason to dispute their correctness?
No, sir.
Are you sure of their correctness?
I am, sir. Okay.
As I mentioned, Professor Hill spoke of you this last Friday as a friend. And, attempts to diminish the significance of these messages, it seems to me, were made by her. And at least at the one press conference, by claiming that many were calls placed to you and not to Judge Thomas, or Clarence Thomas at the time. That the messages to Judge Thomas were only accidental developments from her conversations with you. Have you heard that?
I heard that, yes.
Is that true?
That's not true. Had Anita Hill called me and even asked that I pass on a hello to Judge Thomas, I would have done just that, but it would not have been an official message in his phone log.
I see. Now, I know it's a long time ago, but can you recall any tension or strain in her voice during any of these calls that she made to you and through you to Judge Thomas?
Never.
Okay. So these particular questions that she would leave with you, or these particular statements that she made with you, they were basically unremarkable as far as any emotion or any other.
They were unremarkable to me.
And they were all friendly.
They were all friendly.
And they were all friendly towards Judge Thomas.
They were.
Did you sense any animosity or any hostility or any aggravation?
Never.
Never. Is that true during the whole time that you knew her while she worked there?
That's true of the entire time.
You were the gatekeeper, weren't you?
I was, yes.
Nobody could get in or out without you.
If I was there, that's true.
I'll bet you were a good one. I'll bet you were a good one. Well, I'd like you to go back even further to the time when all three of you worked at the EEOC. After any meeting or lunch between Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, did you ever notice anything about Miss Hill, or Professor Hill, excuse me, and her behavior, her moods, or simply the way she looked, that ever led you to believe that anything unusual had really taken place between her and Clarence Thomas?
Never.
Never once?
I never noticed anything.
Is it fair to say that their relationship was entirely professional?
I would say that, yes.
How about the rest of you? consider the same questions. Is there anything that would have indicated to you that the relationship was anything less than entirely professional? Ms. Alvarez?
No, sir. They always appeared to be very professional with one another. That was the way Clarence demanded it.
Ms. Fish?
Always professional. The times that Anita Hill and I went out together, and that might be no more than 3 times in a little over a year's period, we would leave work and we were talking about the job, talking about him, felt that he was going places and wanted to make sure that we, as his personal staff, were in the position to help him do what he needed to do to get there. So, no.
Ms. Barry Mars?
I don't remember any time them having anything that was more than professional, cordial, friendly. She always indicated that she admired and respected the man.
Always?
Always.
Right up to the day that she left to go to Oral Roberts University?
To my knowledge, yes.
Ms. Holt, in your opinion, is there any other, or any of the others of you, is there any other person in the EEOC or any other person in this country who might have been in a better position to know whether or not Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill had anything other than a strictly professional relationship?
I don't think anyone could say that they had anything other than the professional relationship.
Well, Ms. Holt, as I read this log, there are 4 messages in 1984, 5 messages in 1985, and then only 1 message in 1986, and then 1 in 1987. And then there follows a more than 3-year gap without any messages. What is the last message before that 3-year gap? In fact, the last message in the logbook itself. What is the message of August 4th, 1987?
The one on August 4th?
1987.
Anita Hill, in town till 8:15, wanted to congratulate you on marriage.
So for each of the years, there were a number of calls that you have in the log here, and there were a number of calls outside of the log that were passed through because he was there. But the log call stopped in August of 1987, is that correct?
As far as I know.
Were there any other calls made after that other than the 2 for law schools?
I left the chairman's office in September, immediately after that.
Okay, well, as of that date, in August of 1987, what was the message that was in that log?
I'm sorry, Senator?
As of the date that I mentioned, on August 4th, 1987, in your handwriting, what is the message that was left by Anita Hill?
On August 4th, in town till 8:15, wanted to congratulate you on marriage.
And to your knowledge, that was the last one that you ever took, then?
To my knowledge, yes.
Now, you have independent knowledge, do you not, of Anita Hill's job title while at the Office of Civil Rights. Is that correct?
Right. She was attorney advisor.
She was an attorney advisor. Now, do you know how that position is classified by the government?
Right. I know it's a Schedule A position.
Schedule A. What does that mean?
It means that it doesn't have to go through the normal competitive process.
It means that job's permanent, doesn't it?
Right.
In other words, even though she may not be able to keep that first assistant to the assistant secretary that she had with Clarence Thomas, she'd be able to go in any other area as an attorney advisor.
And even if Clarence Thomas's replacement had not wanted to keep her as his attorney advisor, he could have placed her someplace else within the agency.
Now, she told this committee that she felt like she had to go along with Chairman Thomas over to the EEOC, if I recall this correctly. You correct me if you saw it. But that she was afraid that she might not have a job. Do you think?
To my knowledge, I mean, she never asked me what her options were.
Are you?
I didn't think there was even any indecision on her part. We were both enthusiastic. about going to EEOC.
She was enthusiastic?
She was.
Well, wasn't that, though, because she wanted to serve in this particularly stronger civil rights area?
We discussed that this man was a rising star, and we wanted to be there with him.
But wasn't that just you feeling that way?
No, that was her feeling that way also.
That he was a rising star, and she wanted to be part of that rising star.
We both wanted to be a part of that, yes.
But you're not, I mean, I understand you because you've expressed your loyalty and your feelings towards Chairman Thomas, and Judge Thomas now. But you're sure that that's the way she felt?
I'm sure.
You took her to lunch you two went to lunch on regular bases, didn't you?
We did.
I mean, you knew each other real well. You went many times, didn't you?
We went to lunch often.
Quite often. Well, what did you and Professor Hill like to talk about? Any particular subject or conversations more prominent in your memory than any other? And if you could kind of tie it into here.
There was never any particular subject. We talked about men. We didn't talk about sex in any vivid sense, but we talked about it in a very general sense, as indeed many of my women friends and I do.
Any other
we talked about work, and we talked about what she did on the weekend or what I did on the weekend, just general conversations.
Well, and you never saw anything that would indicate that she had animosity towards then Chairman Thomas?
Never.
Or even at the prior job as Assistant Secretary of Education?
None whatsoever.
And you were just about as close to Judge Thomas as anybody could have been, right?
We are very close, yes.
You've heard, let me just throw this out to all of you. I'm not going to repeat the cumulative charges that would fill a whole page of what she said Judge Thomas told her as he was pursuing her for dates, and as she implied, maybe pursuing her for something more than dates. Now, each of you have heard those, so there's no reason for me to repeat them, but cumulatively, they are pretty awful. Would you all agree?
They are.
Could that have happened? Let's start with you, Ms. Alvarez. Could he have used that language with her?
Clarence Thomas, it's impossible.
It's impossible.
In the work environment, he was so professional. He was so, I considered myself a friend of his, and I could never be friendly with him in the office. He drew that line. We were friends, and then and he was my boss, and when I was in the office, he was professional, as well as we knew each other.
All right. Ms. Fitch?
Yes, the probability of that happening, whether in the workplace or outside of it, in my best knowledge is nil, is zero. The probability is just not there. When I heard those things, I knew they didn't come from him.
So you're saying you know that it's zero, the chances of him doing that?
The probability of his doing that is zero, Senator.
So it really isn't even a probability. It just means it would not have happened. How about you, Ms. Holt?
In my opinion, he would never, ever subject any woman to that kind of language.
Ms. Barry Myers?
When I first met with Clarence Thomas in 1982, we sat in his office. He had a desk, a chair, and the chair I was sitting in. That was all that the EEOC employees left in the chairman's office. That's how much they welcomed him there. And we sat down, and from my political background, usually the first thing that you ask a candidate is, okay, if I open up your closet, what skeletons are going to come falling out? I need to know right now. So I talked to Clarence Thomas about the need to comport himself in a way that there could be absolutely no taint on his reputation, on his character, on his honor, because we were about to embark upon an arduous task. There wasn't anybody in this town, except perhaps Senator Hatch, that supported that man in the position that he had assumed. So I knew that everything that we did, public policy, program, firing people, anything that we did, he was going to be under microscopic scrutiny because he was a black, Republican, conservative, in an agency that was overwhelmingly neither, and in a town that's tough, and he was about to undertake a tough job. And with all the other things that we had to do, we didn't have any time to be dealing with anything that might besmirch his character.
Well, do you have any concerns he might have done otherwise? Well, let me just finish this line. It only takes a couple.
None whatsoever. And not only would he not, but he instructed his personal staff about the need for us to comport ourselves in such a way as to not disgrace his office.
Okay, thank you. My time is up.
We need to take this break now. On behalf of your local cable systems, the hearings will resume after this.
The savings are big during Sears National Hardware Sale. This Craftsman 3/8-inch variable speed drill is a great buy. Or for under $20, pick up any of these Craftsman tool sets or a new toolbox. Your choice, only $19.99. And this Craftsman 50-piece mechanics tool set is only $39.99. It's Sears' biggest hardware sale, and it's happening right now. And there's a whole lot more, so get to Sears National Hardware Sale today.
What is the safest sedan on the road? Ask the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. They studied 134 different car models, comparing fatality rates in highway accidents from 1984 through 88. By that standard, the safest sedan on the road is a Saab 900. One more reason why we don't make compromises. We make Saabs.
Does your washing machine like to dance? When it gets unbalanced, does it strut its stuff instead of cleaning yours? What you need is a strong, silent type, the Frigidaire Horizon 2000. Unlike some washers, it adjusts to unbalanced loads and keeps on running. Frigidaire, clean clothes without the song and dance.
And now get up to $75 cash back on select new appliances from Frigidaire.
Time magazine called him the master funny man of the age. Now, for the first time ever, the legendary king of comedy and music is captured on video in the best of Victor Borga.
Pardon me, madam, are you laying eggs?
Recorded live, this collector's edition of Priceless Comedy is a must for every Victor Borga fan. It's the incomparable Victor Borga in his best loved, most heartwarming comedy performance of all time. The best of Victor Borga on VHS is only $19.95 plus $3.95 postage and handling. To order your personal copy, you must act now.
This is CNN.
Hearings in the confirmation process for Associate Justice Designate Clarence Thomas continue now in Washington at the Judiciary Committee. Senator Howell Heflin for the Democrats is asking the questions of Diane Holt, former secretary to Clarence Thomas.
I had heard that, Senator.
You'd heard it. Was any discussion at that particular time that the Reagan administration wanted to abolish the EEOC?
I had not heard that.
You had not heard that. Now, did you take dictation